lasers do kind of make me a little nervous, honestly. But yeah, we usually use lasers.
I've been using it.
Okay, the City Council for the City of Rollingwood will come to order Wednesday, March 20th, 2024 at 7 o'clock p.m. And we will start with roll call. What? I lost it.
It's right there.
Oh, there she is. That's okay. We'll start in reverse roll call. Go ahead.
Alec Robinson.
Kevin Glasheen.
Phil McDuffie.
Sarah Hudson.
Gavin Massengill and
Brooke Brown.
Brooke Brown. We have a quorum. With that, we will move on to public comment. Do we have anyone wishing to make public comment on agenda items or on items not on the agenda? All right, great. Moving on to presentations. Agenda item number 2, presentation, discussion, and possible action on the fiscal year 2022-2023 audit by ABIP, and I will ask Ashley to open this up for us.
So we have been working over the last few months with our auditors. Big thank you to Abel for all of his work in getting this. Abel, Veronica, actually quite a few staff members are involved in collecting this information. And we have Jeremy Barbato here with ABIP to give our presentation.
Hey, Mayor and Council, thanks for having me here today. My name is Jeremy Barbato. I'm an Audit Senior Manager with ABIP. Michael Del Toro is the engagement partner over the account. He had a prior obligation, so he sent me to take all the credit. I'm accompanied with Tyler Getter. He's actually did a lot of the work and worked with city staff on most of the engagement. So there's my workhorse, and I'm here just to collect the rewards. Page 1 of the audit report. First off, I'd like to mention that this is a draft, and it's a draft just in name. It just has to, it's been scrubbed by management already and reviewed. It just needs council's approval before we can finalize it for publication. So that said, on page 1 is our independent auditors report. This report is our letter to the public explaining what we're engaged to do, and that's audit the accompanying financial statements of the governmental activities, the business type activities, the discretely presented component unit, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information for the city of Rollingwood, Texas for the year ended September 30th, 2023. The basis of our opinion, we did perform our audit in accordance with our standards, generally accepted auditing standards of the United States, and management's responsible for these financial statements you have in front of you. That said, we did obtain enough sufficient evidence to issue our opinion, and we call it in the accounting world an unmodified opinion. It's the highest opinion you can have from an independent accounting firm. Basically states there's no modifying statements in the financial statements you have in front of you today. It's a clean opinion. The next few pages are just elaborate of kind of what our responsibilities are doing our audit, just making sure that we stay within our standards and keep objectivity and professional skepticism. There is some required supplementary information included in the document that we did review as well, and supplementary information that's accompanying this financial statements. The next few pages in here, pages 5 through 9, are really just, or 5 through 10 rather, are the MD&A. If you need a good sleep at night, go ahead and give those a quick read. It does give some qualitative, more on layman terms. We call it the cliff notes of the financial statements. It kind of brings it down, not so technical information. If it gives you a little more information on the actual bones of the financial statements. On page 13 is the statement of net position. This isn't the statement that y'all manage y'all's financial statements at, but it is a very important statement at the end of the year that bond agencies and investors use for the city when the city goes out for bond. It's all your funds consolidated into one column. So our governmental activities, that's all your general debt service, all those funds, special revenue funds, are all in this center column. We had total cash of $4.4 million, which makes up a bulk of our total assets of $7.5 million. The other remaining is capital assets, net of depreciation. Total liabilities is $3.3 million. A lot of that is related to the debt that the city holds, and the net pension liability and OPEB liability. That said, our total net position is $4.5 million. 1.9 of that is unrestricted, so that's for ongoing use of the city. Turning to page 16, your fund level financial statements. This is more what you're used to managing at a council level. We have your major funds presented here, and you get two major funds this year, the general fund and debt service. Quickly just cover the general fund. Our total fund balance, the net worth of the city for the general fund was $4.1 million. Of that, 2.1 is unrestricted and unassigned and able to be used for city operations. $2 million of that is restricted for construction. That's your tax notes that haven't been spent yet. The cash deposits that are held at the bank for those. So those are restricted. So those are only for the purpose of the tax notes to be spent. So the 2.1 million, if you look at your total expenses for the year, is roughly about 2.7. So you're right at about 10 months of operating reserves. So you have enough equity to support about a year's worth of, or about 10 months worth of expenditures for the city. So very healthy fund balance. GFOA recommends anywhere from 3 to 6. So you're on the top end of that benchmark. Finally, on page 18, the general fund had 2.8 million in revenues. About 2.2 of that was related to taxes, either sales, franchise, or property. It kind of spells it out there for you at the top there. Total expenditures was 2.7 million, and a bulk of that is, or just about half, is in your public safety function of the government. That said, we did end the year again with a positive net change in fund balance of $277,000 for the general fund. So overall, good year for the city. Lastly, I'll just cover kind of the high level of the enterprise funds. You have two enterprise funds. You have the water and wastewater funds. The water fund in this column does include the new debt issuance that y'all did issue for your waterworks improvements. So your total cash for the water fund was 3.4. Of that, 3.8 is related to the tax proceeds. I'm sorry, the bond proceeds. And you can see that liability down there in the non-current liabilities of 4.3. Of that, 3.8 is your bonds outstanding for the fiscal year. On the next page, I'll just kind of cover the high-level water fund change in that position. We brought in $206,000 in the wastewater fund, and we had a deficit change in the year of $288,000 in the water fund. And a lot of that's attributable to depreciation expense, which is more of a kind of a paper accounting term, not necessarily a cash flow hit. The rest of the financial statements is the notes to the financial statements. It kind of gives a little more meat behind the financial statement figures themselves, but I'll cover any questions you may have on anything I said today, or the audit process, or anything in the bound document in front of you.
Great, good presentation. Thanks for walking us through it. Council, you have any questions?
The letter that is presented along with the report makes a statement on page 2 that there were some correcting journal entries, and it says they're listed in an attachment to the letter.
Yes, I do
And
see
there's
that.
the attachments.
You were missing the attachment. I can get that forwarded to you.
Okay.
Yeah, there were a number of journal entries as a result of the audit, and we wanted to be transparent and let you know the adjustments we had to make to get them in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles, and we just failed to attach that.
Okay.
Are those pretty ordinary, though? Is that pretty ordinary?
Yeah, we didn't have any like significant journal entries that we don't have every year. So
Okay, thank
a
you.
lot of them are just reclass and making sure the funds are.
And I'm assuming they all
Reported.
balance out, but, okay. All right.
Yeah, you wouldn't get a clean opinion if we weren't solid with the
All right,
numbers.
good.
Great. Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Councilman?
Just a curiosity question. You said that on our expenditures that the public safety was about half of it. So what all goes into that? Other than, I'm imagining police salaries and expenses, but what else?
Yeah, I don't have the grouping schedule in front of me, but I believe it's predominantly, police. Did they have fire? Did it contract out fire? EMS?
Only police,
Okay.
but I'm sure the majority is payroll. Police. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, so we have a grouping schedule that groups all those, the management codes, and we just lump them all together to show that. So I didn't have the details in front of me.
Thank you. Council, any other questions? Okay, thank you so much for being.
I do want to cover,
Yes.
sorry, this letter that she referenced, that we failed to include the attachment. I apologize for that. We'll get that to y'all. But this is our required communication with the city council. Kind of just explains how the audit went for us as auditors. There's accounting estimates. We have to explain that there are accounting estimates in the financial statements themselves, and we evaluated those and feel they're clear and consistent. There are financial statement disclosures in here, and if there's any that we feel necessary to highlight, we highlight those. And we have one on the city's deficit in fund balance for the drainage fund, and also the what do you call it? The prior period adjustment that we had during the year. Going on the next page, if we had any difficulties in performing the audit or any uncorrected misstatements or corrected misstatements, we disclose those to you. Like I mentioned, we had some adjustments, and so we have an attachment to this that should have been attached to this. If we had any disagreements with management, we didn't have any. We required to communicate that with you. Finally, we did have one comment that we identified right at the end of the year, and a lot of it was related to the bond issue. At the end of the year, the city was under collateralized in their deposits by $2.1 million. The money's still there. It's just Public Funds Investment Act requires that the city have adequate FDIC coverage and/or pledge collateral from the bank that y'all use to cover those deposits that y'all hold at the bank. So at the end of the year, you were under collateralized at $2.1 million, but that was subsequently fixed by Abel and his team. So we saw that it got cleared in October.
Yes, and we did discuss that, and we'll be addressing that with our financial institution.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Thank you again. Any other questions, council? If not, I'm happy to accept a motion to accept the audit report.
So moved.
You have a motion to accept the audit report as presented by Ms. Hudson. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second by Mr. McDuffie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. 5 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Thank you again
Thank you
for
so
being
much.
here, taking your time. With that, we will move on to the consent agenda and accept a motion on the consent agenda.
So moved.
You have a motion by Mr. Robinson on the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Mr. Robinson, a second by Ms. Hudson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Moving on to agenda item number 3. To the regular agenda, agenda item number 4, update and discussion regarding the next bond issuance for water CIP package 1 through 4. This is an agenda item that Ms. Wayman and I placed on the agenda for you. It's not posted for action. We just wanted to bring it to your attention, let you start thinking about it, and I'll let Ms. Wayman start us off.
We've been in discussions with K-Freeze, and based on our schedule for construction, we believe that we will need to go back out for additional funds by the end of this year. But we did 3.9 million of our 5.3 previously, so there is still 1.4 million remaining to be issued for this for our water CIP projects. It's about a 3-month process to get that bond, done and have cash in hand. And so we'll likely bring something to you in the next month or two so that we can have that by early August. The reason why we need to have that all determined by early August is so that it can figure into our tax rate for the following year. So we need to get that information to the county for when they calculate our tax rates, so we can include that bond issuance amount starting next year for our tax rate. So likely next month we'll be bringing some additional information. We'll work with our financial advisor to bring y'all some preliminary information.
And when do you anticipate actually issuing the bonds? At the end of the year? December?
Probably, well, we'd have to technically have them issued, pretty close to that August time. We'd have to know exactly what the amount that we're going to be adding to the rate. So basically August.
You wouldn't use an assumed rate, you'd go ahead and issue the bonds?
We can talk to our financial advisor about if that's a possibility.
Well, the only reason I ask is because, the Fed announced today they're expecting 3 more rate cuts this year still.
Mm-hmm.
And just seemed like the longer we could wait, the better.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we'll have to balance that, and I agree with you if we can do that. Balancing that with the timing of having to get it into the county so that it does get factored into the rate. But yes, I think we'll try to push it as far as we can to see if we can have any benefit there. And this is really just to save the date, let you know that it's let you know that it's coming, and the reason it's coming. Trying to give you plenty of notice to let you know that.
And one other question, when do you think we'll have to use those funds? Do we know
That's-
that yet?
Yeah, that's, I think, the discussions, I'll let Ashley elaborate, but in conversations with Kay Freeze, they're looking ahead at the work schedule and see that we're going to probably need it in this next year, right?
Yeah, probably by the end of this year, because we have through mid-2025 is the full construction schedule, so that leaves us about 6 months in 2025. We'll have been a year into it, 2/3 of the way through it by the end of this year. We've issued 3.9, and the remaining 1.4 would be what would be issued by the end of this year.
It's a long horizon, but still trying to keep it in mind, so. That's your friendly neighborhood update. Anything else on that? Alec, did you have
Just
something?
really, well, it was the same question.
Yeah.
But the other thing I was wondering is just, I think it'd be good to start getting updates on, like, just how are things going with it? I don't know if we were, like can talk about this the way we've kind of written this agenda item or not, but like how, I was kind of wondering.
We have talked about it. We're probably going to give a bigger update. We'll have some, I think, good progress in hand by this time next month. So we'll kind of give an overall update.
Okay.
I know they're making progress because they tore up my
I saw
cul-de-sac.
that today.
Yeah, so we'll have a broader update on the progress next month.
We will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving off of agenda item number 4 on to agenda item number 5, discussion and possible action on a request from I-9 Sports for use of fields 3, 4, and 5 in summer camps from 9 a.m. to noon on May 28th through 31st, June 10th through 14th, June 17th through 21, and June 24th through 28th, 2024. We had this agenda item last month. I think council's discussion on that was that you were open to the discussion, but not interested in making a decision on it at that time, but would, if I-9 wanted to come talk about it more, that you would be open to that. They do. They're here. Maybe have stolen Ashley's opener. Was that the opener?
That was my opener.
Okay, great. So with that, I'll open it to council, but then we do have I-9 here. Do you want me to just go to I-9? Is that okay? Okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Please identify yourself for the record, and the floor is yours.
My name is Justin Cannon, the owner of I-9 Sports. We run youth sports leagues. We've used Rollingwood for the last couple of years, several times previous, and just trying to get an understanding of what we can do. We've done several steps with you guys where we feel like we've gotten an idea of what we're supposed to do, and then we try to do it, and then it changes on the fly. So just trying to get some clarification on what we can and can't do. So that's why we're here. I'm back in front.
Okay, great. Actually, you want to just give a recap of where we are in terms of policy?
Sure. Current policy is fields 3, 4, 1, and 2 are able to be rented as long as, of course, there's not a conflict with softball, baseball. But 3, 4, and 5 do require council approval before those can be rented out. And so they have requested for some of their larger camps that it looks like is their summer camps that they would like to use fields 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, and one question about the policy too. So we run clinics like 4:30 to 5:30, which is times that the softball, baseball fields are. They have my understanding is they have access to those fields, and we tag along with their time. We still pay for renting of those for those clinics. What I'm talking about is like Tuesday from 4:30 to 5:30, and they give us a corner of 3, 4, and 5. Is that still needing council approval for that usage? Since it's not, I view that as completely different than the summer camp where we're kind of in the middle of the day taking a block of 3 hours of the whole field. Are those separated items in the council policy? Because they used to be, and so I'm trying to just get a feel for where we're at.
I can't say that our current statement of policy has address that specific issue. It has been, if any use of 3, 4, and 5, that it does need to be approved by the city council. So I guess that is something we could discuss here, and if that's something we can bring back at the next meeting, if there's something that the council would like to address related to that.
Well, that was the first I've heard of y'all using 3, 4, and 5 while baseball is using it, so maybe you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, so like for instance, last year we had an agreement at the time with the current policy where if softball, because softball uses 3, 4, and 5 during the week for their practices, if there's a space that we can use, we can run our clinics in the afternoon. We call them an after-school clinic because it's after school, but it's just a short hour, that 4:30 to 5:30. And you'll have softball teams practicing, and I-9 will use one of those corners while they're out there. So it's already, if the field's already being used for youth sports, it's not conflicting with other activities that the field might be used for. And so the agreement was, hey, as long as softball, which has that time kind of in their window, allows I-9 to use it, then we fill out an application, pay the city for that usage, and kind of tag along with that time frame. And that is obviously different and creates different types of conflicts than the summer camp, which is a morning, 3 hours at a time, Monday through Friday. So I just didn't know if those were treated differently, or because I can't, to be honest, I can't come in front of the city council every 2 months to see if the clinic can get approved for that. And so I just need to decide whether or not that works.
I still need to understand that a little bit better. You say there was an agreement. Who is there an agreement between?
Yeah, so we went through a big process at one point where there was a application that got filled out. There was a Google form on the website with the city where we filled it out. This council, previous council, had voted that we were approved vendor, and as long as it had passed in the criteria at the time, then we could use that. So we had been operating under that, then the policy changed, and then we lost some of that access, which is kind of why I'm back here today. And I get the summer camp. I understand the issues with summer camp, but the clinic didn't ever seem to cause an issue. But with the language that you mentioned, Ashley, with 3, 4, and 5, I just want to clarify to the council what you want us to do.
So my question was, who is the agreement with?
You guys.
Okay, when with me, but you're saying that you had an
So
agreement with
previously, what he describes is the way we operated, but this council said, anytime they want to do 3, 4, and 5, they just need to come back and talk
council?
to
So it
us
was
about
previous policy, not an agreement.
Right, yeah.
Not an agreement, just to be clear.
Yes.
Sorry, yes.
No, that's okay. I just want to make sure I understand you. And then why would softball be using 3, 4, and 5 and not the softball field? I'm not that familiar with.
Yeah, so softball has different age groups of girls, and they run practices on the
Okay.
3, 4, and 5 backstops.
Sure.
There's actually a field 6. I call it field 6. You guys don't have it numbered. It's a corner that is on the left field of the softball field that isn't numbered, and we end up using that a lot of times, that little corner, and just pay the $25 because they'll be using fields 4 and 5, and we just use that kind of corner. So it's already being used by kids through the softball, and then we just coordinate with the softball program to make sure we're not in the way. We're talking, just to be clear, we're talking 10 to 15 kids
Okay.
on those clinics.
All right, so you want clarification over a policy and also want permission to use the fields in the summer for the summer.
Yeah,
Those are those two things.
The clinics, I feel like, are a separate issue that you guys might, I would assume you guys would view it as a different issue than what we call the problems we cause with our summer camps. And so if we want to keep the clinics we run because it's at a request of Rollingwood residents and people that have wanted us to do it here. If it's a problem, just let me know. I've had to cancel clinics when the policy changed because I wasn't informed that it had changed. And so I just want clarification from the council on how you guys want us to do it.
Well, that wasn't really the story we heard about what happened, but I don't think that's what you're here for. is
No,
to
no.
air grievances or resolve.
No grievances. I apologize if you took it as
that's
a
okay.
grievance. I'm just trying to figure out what we can and can't do.
Sure. Okay. I'd like to hear from the Parks Commission whenever you're done.
Okay. Any other questions for I-9 council?
Well, I mean, so certainly when the fields are already being occupied by softball on 2, 3, and 4, and you're using a corner, that seems entirely reasonable. The issue is there's, as I keep repeatedly out at the fields, there is no schedule. People still are under the impression there's a schedule. There really isn't. It's kind of like people show up and use those teams show up and use those fields when it's convenient and it's very flexible because of rain issues or just any other issues in life. And so the only concern that I would have is you've set a clinic, you're going to be using a very small corner, but we have a policy which I think makes sense. The gray areas don't tend to work, of absolutely no dogs are allowed on the fields 3, 4, and 5 when there is any kind of organized game or organized practice. And the clinic is kind of a gray area between those two things, but I think it's a similar activity. And what I don't want to get into is the entire field being denied usage when you're running a clinic on a little corner. I don't have a problem with it when it's already being denied. And also, you're saying it's only going to be an hour, which also makes it much more palatable as long as there can be kind of set up and tear down with a tight tolerance of that. So,
Yeah, so something to look at for you guys as far as the clinics. I know the summer camps are kind of what was on the agenda, and the time frame, speaking of setup, our camp is 9 to 12, so we would typically do like an 8:30 setup, 12:15 tear down, so just to be accurate. 9 to 12 is the actual players camp. And just so everybody understands the reason, I've had conversations with many folks and residents and previous members and so forth. The softball fields and baseball fields are great, and we're happy to use those if we can. You can put basically the kids sign up to camp to play a sport, and that sport has somewhat of a regulation size field, if you will. And I can get 2 fields, one on each of the baseball fields for my sports like soccer or flag football. And so I can entertain about 30-ish kids on there on the 2 fields. Anything bigger than that makes it tough. And so we've requested 3, 4, and 5. We've at one point in a previous policies, we've had the reserve 3, 4, and 5. If we can use 1 and 2, we do it on the fly. Then we've had policies where if we book it, we're supposed to have it. So we're flexible, and we try to be flexible. All I'm asking from the council is clarification on what it is you want us to do. And so if it works for you guys and we say, hey, on 3, 4, and 5, if we can use 1 and 2, we will. But if we need 3, 4, and 5, if we get 50 kids, and just so you know, the last summer we had one camp that had 50 and one kid that had 30. So there was one camp where we probably needed to use 3, 4, and 5, and one camp where we could have used 1 and 2. In the past, we've moved from 3, 4, and 5 in the middle of our camp to 1 and 2. So 1 and 2 is a possibility. It's not. I'm not trying to strong arm 3, 4, and 5. I'm just trying to make sure I have an ample enough room to run what we try to run.
How far out is when they sign up for a camp? How far out do you sort of know? Like, can they sign up until the day of?
Yeah. So for summer's a weird animal because people sign up as early as February for their camps. They're trying to schedule their kids, and then we get people that sign up the day of. Mm-hmm. And so typically we would make a decision about how many coaches we're going to hire, which triggers our ID, all that stuff, about 20 days before the camp starts. We would have a good idea, and I'd be able to say this is what we're going to do.
So we could even say it 2 weeks out.
2 weeks out, I can say this is
final
what we're
call.
doing, this is what we're not.
Okay, that's helpful.
And I'm happy, like I said, I'm happy to use fields 1 and 2 if that's what
If it's small
the
enough.
council wants us to do now.
Right. If it's small enough. If it's
If it's big enough, I would ask that if we're going to provide a sports camp, I need to provide a sports camp.
Okay. Council?
Thanks for coming.
No, it's fine. I've had kids at Western Hills for 12 years. I served on the board of the softball program. I worked with the Parks Commission on some of the projects. I'm familiar with what's going on, and I want to continue to work with Rollingwood if I can.
No, we want to work with you.
The
We
policy
appreciate
just
you-
kind of
We
fluctuates.
appreciate you coming to talk to us.
Yeah.
And I think we want to hear from Melissa if she wants to talk about it.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
You got, no, I'm glad, no, that's,
Sorry.
I need all the help I can get. Ms. Morrow, please
Melissa
identify.
Morrow, 2502 Timberline Drive, also the Parks Commission Chair. We did not discuss this at the Parks Commission, so I'm probably just going to kind of talk about it generally. I believe that the intent is to have the maximum number of park users using the park at any given time. And the intent of having use of 1 and 2 for smaller camps is so that the other is available for other people. Because the dog users cannot use 1 and 2 at all. So my recommendation, not based on the committee because it did not come to us, but we'd be happy to discuss it if you sent it to us, would be to say that, you know, just tell him if it's up to 30 kids, you have 1 and 2, and if you have more kids than that, then let us know 2 weeks in advance and we'll have you on 3, 4, and 5. Or, I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I don't know how other people in the community feel, but up until the day that registration ends, say the day before, you could say, we're moving to 3, 4, and 5. I agree with him as someone who also in my real life runs camps. It's much better for our staff to know which ones we're setting up on the day before, and it's better to not have to change fields in the middle of a week. So I would definitely, you know, advise, you know, just as certainty for parents. So I don't know if that helps the conversation, but I think that's what I've gotten as sort of the intent.
Thank you.
This is one quick question though. This only takes you through June. Are you coming back for July and August? Okay, great.
Okay.
I just have a question for,
Oh, wait, I think we,
yeah, Melissa, I've
Melissa,
got a
we-
question for you. Because I haven't been involved in the Park Commission for a while. It was my understanding, it may be incorrect, that all of the other workout groups and things like that have a limitation on the number of participants. So is that still the case, or is that a case? I mean, that's,
Well, I think usually they turn in when they ask for or they're paying for, they tell how many, I think that's right. They say how many they're gonna have. Again, it's harder with a camp where you're hoping to have 50 kids.
sure.
But you would still have it if you had up to, I don't know, 10, or do you have a minimum?
I think you're more concerned about the maximum.
Right.
Yeah, I think our maximum would probably, on this facility, would probably be 80.
80.
Which, by the way, we've never had, except the year of COVID when everybody was looking for camps. So, highly unlikely, 50-ish, much over 50 is kind of rare.
Again, if that's something you want Parks Commission to look at as, do you want us to help you set a maximum? 80 seems probably reasonable.
Would you rather us send it to Parks for input, or are you okay with us just voting on it?
If I think he needs to have some certainty. I would. I mean, just again, as someone who runs camps, would need some certainty as soon as possible. So,
Okay.
I mean, and again, I'm not saying that I don't want it to come to us, because I would have loved it to come to us 3 months ago, but I don't want to hold him up for sure. But that's just me as an individual. I can't really speak on behalf of the commission because we didn't vote on it.
Thank you.
Also for clarification, the previous policy that had, or the, you know, policy and process that we had before, we did have a usage limit to 50 participants for Hatley Field usage, and then for non-field park usage to 20 participants. So for like our other workout groups that have been off the field. So we do currently have a 50 participant limit for the fields.
Well, then that sounds like that's something that we should have the Park Commission take a look at, because if we have a limit for 50 for any other activity,
Is that for Hatley 1, or is that for Hatley 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
It says just field usage limited to 50 participants. It doesn't state, it could possibly be 1 or 2 is 50 participants, and then 3, 4, and 5 is 50 the way it's written, but we'd have to do some research to see what the previous policy was.
sounds like we need some clarification because we don't know exactly what the policy is.
Right.
That would make sense. My only other question or comment is that this is asking for approval to have camps from 9 to noon, but the rental is from 8:30 to 12:30, right? So,
setup and takedown.
right. So we just need to make sure that we know when the fields are off limits for other use. Because, you know, if you have setup time, then that needs to be part of the,
Correct.
And they have generally paid for, you always pay for their setup and breakdown time as well, but.
Recent policy, we pay for that, started requesting it.
well, we just also, for the rest of the community, need to know that, you know, when people, if they're gonna bring their dog up here, it's like, you gotta be gone by 8:30, right? Cause that's when they're gonna come in to set up. So just so folks know what the expectations are.
Could I get you to come back up for a second? So, I assume, are these camps open, are your signups open currently?
Yes.
Do you know offhand how close you are to 30 on any of them, but most importantly on the May 28th one?
I did not look at the existing just because we were very far. We're still pretty far out, so I didn't even look to see what they were. I don't think any of them are over 30.
Well, and I was just thinking, to Ms. Morrow's point, to not hold you up. I mean, you could still be collecting, you know, having people sign up. I would think it gets more important for you to have clarity once you get closer and closer to 30.
Yeah, I was operating under the idea that there would be a good opportunity to get approved by the next board meeting in April. If it goes past that, then it's hard. I need to find alternative venues. If there's still uncertainty at that point.
All right. Okay.
I'm also thinking if we had a limit, hopefully we could get you could get the word out and maybe push people to sign up sooner, you know, and actually, you know.
We do that naturally, but
Yeah. I understand.
one thing I did do last year. I think we ran 3 camps. This year I asked for more, and the reason why I asked for more is because in the camp world, if I have 3 weeks and I get 100 kids spread across those 3 weeks, if I do 4 weeks, I'm going to get 100 kids spread across 4 weeks. It's not that people want I-9 for a reason and they schedule around I-9, and so if I provide more weeks, it gives me smaller camps. So I did that in an effort to try to keep the numbers down as much as I can. So that's why you'll see more camps requested this summer than what we have done in the past. Just in an effort to keep this going.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Also, Justin, it's just a side issue, but you know, we've asked before, the staking of things in the ground and stuff like that is possibly caused problems in the park with hitting our irrigation lines, stuff like that. Is there anything that you can do to not do that?
I think the only thing we stake down is the canopy for a check-in, and we can use sandbags for that. I'm not sure.
I think there's also the big flag thing.
Oh, the soccer corner flags?
Yeah,
we can.
big-
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
we can try to do something like that if that's a problem.
yeah, that would be appreciated.
So would April be soon enough? It won't create a problem. That way parks could look at it.
Sure.
Okay.
Our meeting is gonna be a week after yours. Isn't that right, Ashley? I think we had to move it because some people couldn't be there.
April.
20,
So April 24th. I know, but 24th I would know.
Well, then
Or then
might
it comes
come
to
back
y'all.
us,
Oh, gotcha.
and then that's gonna put you into May.
Yeah, because the issue with May, the alternative venues I use are schools, and so I have to have all that confirmed before school's out, and before it gets too crazy in May. So
Do y'all want to try to give him approval for 3, 4, and 5 in May, but we'll still go through the process to be able to, and hold off on the June camps? So we could do the same process y'all are describing, but you can go and give him approval on 3, 4, and 5 for May.
Well, we don't know numbers. They may be able to make 1 and 2 work.
True, they might
in
still
May.
even,
But-
right.
But that'd be part of the motion, I think, if we made the motion to approve as requested for May, that if you have less than 30, you'll use 1 and 2, and if you have more than that, you can use 3, 4, and 5. Right.
I think that would be reasonable.
I would just say do all days, all dates requested with that language.
Would that be all right?
You could also do that
That's-
and let that just be the standing thing and then still go through the, yeah.
One of the things that occurs in the summer is people sign up, but they don't really send their kid out. And so part of what I'm trying to deal with too is when there's I understand there's how many people signed up and then there's how many people show up. And when you see very few participants out there on the field, but the fields are being denied by residents and other people in the community, that's difficult to defend. So I'm just trying to find a balance between those two things. You know?
Yeah, just so we're clear, last summer, we operated under the fact that if I booked 3, 4, and 5, I had 3, 4, and 5. There was no limit, so that might have happened. In this case, if we have 30 kids and 25 of them, rarely do we have less than 25 if we get 30 kids. And so we'd still be under 1 and 2. And again, I'm happy to operate. We just weren't operating like that last summer. So,
Okay.
if that's the change, then that's great. We can handle that.
Yeah, but so generally, like when you run a camp, like what percentage of the campers show up or?
99. I mean, if it's a sickness, I mean, parents pay money and they want their kid to be there, whether it's raining or pouring or lightning, or they not want to come pick them up. So most of the time, unless there's a sickness unforeseen or an injury or something, our camps are pretty well attended.
Although I will say last summer, it was over 100 degrees, and by July, we did have some parents who had signed
Oh yeah, I mean, but we're not talking July. We're talking
Yeah.
June, May and June, and we're on grass, so which is nice.
Okay. Happy to take a motion.
I make a motion we approve the request for use of fields 3, 4, and 5 for summer camps from 9 a.m. to noon on May 28th through 31st, June 10th through 14th, June 17th through 21st, and June 24th through 28th, 2024, on the condition that if there are less than 30 kids at the camp, they use fields 1 and 2 and only use 3, 4, and 5 if they need to for a larger group.
You
That's
had
30 per field, right? Is that?
30 total.
One field.
I get about 15 to 20 kids on a field. So at 30 kids, I can't use one. So we'll divide them up between the two fields. Instead of going 40 and trying to put 20 on 20, which gets crazy, it allows me to fluctuate. So 30 allows I can use 1 and 2 comfortably.
got it. All right, you have the motion, council. Is
And
there-
just to clarify, 8:30 setup.
yes,
12:15.
It's approving the camp as
Okay.
a whole, but we'll take care of the setup and all that. Okay, you have a motion by Mr. Glasheen. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Mr. Glasheen, a second by Mr. Robinson. Further discussion, council?
Do we need to tweak the motion to say 8:30 to
I mean,
12:30?
the way I'm interpreting the motion is you're approving the camp to happen, and then we'll book it however it needs to happen to make that
Okay.
happen. So
All right, I just
I think we're
wanted to
good.
make sure we're clear.
Yeah.
So,
And that keeps us in how it's posted. My interpretation.
there you go. Okay.
my interpretation is just legal. Okay.
Well,
All right. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
aye.
Opposed say no. There being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, council. Thank you, Einine.
Appreciate the time.
Justin.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 6. Discussion and possible action. Before I get off of 5 too, I do think we'll continue to go through and let you guys, is that council's desire?
I think so.
I don't know that we need, the chairwoman's here. I mean, we could send it there, but I think chairwoman's here. It's clear on the desire to take a look at it, knowing kind of what the, and we can talk more about it, but there you go. Put it on your, carry on with your agenda.
Put me at the beginning of the meeting, I'll come to
Okay, moving off agenda item number 5 on to agenda item number 6. Discussion and possible action regarding a policy for recovering expenses incurred due to contractor caused water line breaks. This is Sarah's, Ms. Hudson's agenda item. I'll recognize her. We do, I think, have some thoughts on this topic, but I'll let you open it up, Ms. Hudson.
Okay. The beginning of February, we had a water line break on Pickwick and Hubbard Circle. We got a notification at 5 o'clock that afternoon that the repairs had been done, and, you know, everything was good. And I happened to be out in my front yard about 6:30 that night, and a car drove down Almerian Way over by my house. It's a low point. It's where one of the drainage projects is going on right now. There's a lift station there and a ditch down into the, you know, the drainage feature down there. A car drove down the road, and I could tell it was driving through water. And I said, this doesn't sound right. And I had a friend was over at the time, and I went, I'm gonna go see what's going on, where the water's coming from. So we go down there, and there is a river running down the street and going down the ditch. So we go up Almerian Way and down Hatley and see where the water is coming through at a high volume, coming through the ditch that goes between the Shapiro's and the Deal's house, which is where the drainage comes from Hubbard Circle, and went around the block up there to where the leak was. And because when we had been told the leak had been fixed, then I was concerned that it had ruptured again or something had happened and it was, you know, running unabated. But we went up and they were actually working on it. And as we're walking, the friend goes, so who pays for all this water? And I went, oh, well, that would be the city. And I didn't know what the cause of the leak was, you know, what happened. But called the next day and found out that it was a leak caused by a contractor. And the volume of water was substantial. And if a resident has a leak on their side of the meter, they have to pay the wholesale cost of the water plus 10%, I believe, is what our if they can, you know, document that they had a leak and it was repaired, and, you know, so we know what the usage was. It's out of the ordinary. So it seemed to me that even though we have contractors pay for the cost of repairing the leak when they cause it, we have not had them pay for the cost of the water, which could also be significant, and that we needed to come up with a system to assess the cost of the water to be reimbursed as well, because otherwise we're all paying for that. And you know, there are significant consequences to us using wasting water, if you will, if we're, you know, going to have to look for we don't want to have to look for another source of water, so we need to be vigilant in our water usage and water waste. So that is the background of why I brought this up. I had not suggested a method for determining the volume. I had asked Ashley at the time how often we read the master meters, if we have a way of knowing, you know, what the daily water usage is coming in, if that was something that we could use the city's measured water usage, and then you have a pretty good idea what typical is for that time of the year. And you know, if you have a leak, then it's going to be significantly different that day. Maybe a little uncertain during the summertime when people are irrigating, if they're actually following our water restrictions and only watering on certain days. So that would impact the typical usage. But that would be one way of doing it. Then this other draft policy that's in the packet is another way. I don't know who we anticipate actually doing the calculations based on diameter and flow rate and time and all of that. Once upon a time, I probably knew how to do that, but haven't had to do that in a long time, so I don't think that there's anybody at the city that would have that.
So
Well,
before they fix it, we just go down there
Yes,
and measure.
please.
Okay, your flow rate's now you can go.
yeah.
Well, I mean, 100 gallons a minute makes a pretty good river of water. And if it ran for 100 minutes, that's going to be 100,000 gallons, and we're paying $4.65 per thousand. So that's about a $500 worth of water over, 2 hour and 45 minutes. So just to
And
give you a
this
rough
was
idea.
multiple hours that this
Was
was
it?
running.
Yeah. So this has. So first of all, I agree with the concept, and it's one that we have talked about in the past. The difficulty in it has always been what you alluded to at the end, especially for a water line break. The way we can bill the way we bill residents and anyone else is that it's metered, right? And so we
Right.
know. And so if you were to have a water line break behind a meter, that's why we can charge the resident because it's behind the meter. When it's not behind the meter, that's where the difficulty arises because you just have water flowing and you're not able to measure that. So that's always been the difficulty in addressing this problem that we have known has existed for a while. And I do think it's worthy of us trying to figure out how to address that. And we have given it some thought. And that's now when I'll turn it over to Ashley.
So actually, we had been doing a lot of research on this. We did look into the master meter concept. Those are read every day by Crossroads, so they, that would be a valid option. We were just trying to think through, the best method for telling a contractor, hey, here's the calculation we did, and here's how much, money you owe us for it. Izzy actually did a lot of research and we found a very handy calculator for calculating water loss. And so it's through the city of Austin. The engineers have taken a look at it and said that the calculations look great. We would obviously, if we're going to for sure make it our policy, that we would, make sure it's right and make sure all the formulas are working correctly. But it just, it talks about whether it's a hole, whether it's a crack, whether it's a full, pipe is, gone in a certain area, flow rate, things like that, pressure. So it's all things that we believe we can collect in the field. In the past, we've kind of always had to balance, swiftness in getting it taken care of versus data collection. But I think now we have a team that's, capable of doing all of that. Similar to the notices, we've been doing a lot of work on getting our notices a little more, cleaned up. We have to sometimes balance, do we notice a larger portion than we think need it to make sure that those get notified, but then risk, noticing the whole city and not everybody needing to get a citywide notice. And then also how quickly do we get it out and how accurate can it be? If we do really fast, sometimes we miss, they told us it was isolated and we put it was repaired, and things are not always 100%. And so I'll just speak a little bit to this draft policy in the packet. We also spoke to legal about this and actually feel that a lot of this would need to actually be put in our code as opposed to just having a policy for how we're going to charge this. And so our hope today was to get your thoughts on kind of the general idea of what we're planning to do. We had been, it had been brought up by different people. Well, do we have fines for when this happens? Do we have different kinds of, what do we do when this happens? And currently, the only fine we have really is calling without digging, which is a state law that you do have to call before you dig. So if they don't do that, sometimes the lines aren't marked very accurately and they have called and it just still happens. And usually obviously in that case, we don't, penalize them or give them a ticket for that. But we do generally write, tickets for call without digging. But that's pretty much the only thing we have in our ordinance as far as additional fines. And so we've basically proposed materials, staff time, any contractor time when we use Crossroads, and then as well as that water loss calculation that we would propose to be added to the policy. But we wanted to get any direction for additional things to be added to that policy, and then we could bring it back next month with accompanying code amendments that would make it all enforceable.
How did it break?
How did what break?
The water line? How did it get
Which
broke?
time?
Yeah, that one was a contractor.
Yeah, but how? Were they have
It's
a
usually
backhoe
it's a lot of times it's a backhoe.
Generally, yeah.
in the street or
No.
No,
in that right of way
Mm-hmm.
that I learned about last meeting?
Did they do the call? Did they do a call before?
I can't. Do you
Was it
remember on
like-
that one if they called before?
Yeah, they usually do
They
call.
generally do, it's just there may be a foot, you know, I mean, the spray paint, the measurements are
Have
exact.
we billed contractors in the past for damaging water lines?
We do. We always have them pay for the repair and for all of that.
Including all of our staff's time and all that?
Mhm.
Yes.
We just haven't, the water loss has not been
Alright.
something we've.
Yeah, to be clear, that has been practice for a long time. We think codifying it, I mean, it's just been the practice, but we think if we're going to go through this process of getting this kind of last piece that Sarah has brought to us, wrapping it all up and putting it in the code is probably the best way to go.
Just because it's useful to understand how this happens, what about the breakover on Timberline? Was that the same thing? Somebody using a backhoe in the,
I don't remember.
That was a contractor.
I know it was a contractor.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was a backhoe. That's how it generally happens.
It was at that property. It was at a new construction, so I'm assuming it was in the right of way. Same, probably a similar thing. I'm just trying to get my arms around how this occurs and see if there's multiple ways this is occurring, or it's just usually
Our experience is usually it's heavy equipment
okay.
of some sort.
Okay.
So for a code remedy, what about a violation, fixed amount, like $1,000 or more if we calculate a water loss? That way we don't have to try to calculate 50, 100, 10,000 gallon water losses. I'm just
You could,
asking. You know,
You
like
could do that. I think I really kind of feel like if we can come up with a good way to calculate it, which I think we're on the verge of having that, it's probably more equitable, because the 1,000 you may be overshooting the true damage, or you may be really undershooting it. I mean, if it
If it's the
was,
same price for any leak, then there's no
Right.
incentive to,
yeah.
But they owe this anyway under common law negligence standards, just as if a contractor ran a stop sign and ran into Izzy's truck and then owed the property damage. It's the same thing. It's negligence. They owe it, and you don't need a code to enforce that.
Except we have to go to court to enforce it.
No, you don't. You just send a demand letter to them and say, this is the damages to our property. Just like if they damage the pickup truck, you don't have to go to court for that either. You send a letter that says, you ran in the stop sign, hit our pickup truck, you owe us this much property damage, and they turn it into their insurance, or they just write a check.
I mean, under that.
I'm sorry, I meant if they refuse to pay. Then we gotta prove negligence. Under our code, we just have to prove that they did it,
Yeah.
Right.
not negligently.
Yeah, sure.
But either way, I think that's why we haven't had a real problem with the practice that, I mean, essentially the practice you just described is the practice
And it's work.
it's worked. It's this last piece
Adding
of
the water.
the water. Yes, ma'am.
Are these contractors working on a home construction? Are they contractors working on a gas line? What kind of contractor are we talking about?
It's all over the board, really. I mean, it's, right, I'm getting head nods from staff. It's really, it's all over. I mean, sometimes it's a landscaper, sometimes it's the plumber, sometimes it's, the general contractor, sometimes it's my yard guy.
And in the case of like a Texas Gas or someone working in the right of way, we have a franchise agreement with them that says anything that they do, they will put back in, better or equal or better condition. And so that would fall under this for the repair. But I think it's more generally residential contractors or landscapers or something.
Well, even with an ordinance, when you still have to
Well,
have
I
a
had a
mens rea.
follow-up.
Oh, one second.
I had a
Yes, ma'am.
follow-up.
No, go ahead.
Sorry.
Are there repeat offenders?
We haven't really,
Not much.
honestly,
No.
haven't really seen
That
repeat
I'm aware of.
offenders.
I'm just trying to see if there's
Right.
any technique available to lessen the number of these.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
No, is the answer to your question.
So no intent requirement. You
That's
could
why
have
I like it
strict
in the
li-
code, strict liability.
Strict liability?
Don't have to prove negligence. You broke it, you owe us the dollars.
What if they called on dig test and we marked it incorrectly? That can't be strict
We
liability.
don't, we don't do
We
that.
don't do all the they do we don't do the marking.
Oh. Okay. That works, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty common.
Okay, great.
do you want utility commission to take a look at this?
I don't think it's necessary, personally, but
I didn't know if we wanted utility commission to weigh in on.
We're happy to have them take a look if that's y'all's preference, if that's your preference. I think that they would look to us for the technical guidance on it, and I think this is the technical guidance we would give. So my guess is they'll come to the same conclusion.
yeah, that's
I just didn't
mine
want
as
to
well.
ignore them
Yeah,
if
I
that
think
was
good.
something.
Well, I've talked to them when we've acted and been accused of acting unilaterally before, and so far, they're okay with
Unilateral action.
Well, I mean, they trust us for better or worse. They trust us so
Okay.
far. So.
Happy to do it either way, truly. I think that probably delays us 30 days, or it will.
Here, one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
And this will come up another time. Will the process be that Charlie's firm will do a draft ordinance and then bring that back to us based on the input we've
Based on
given
tonight's
tonight?
input, yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Mhm.
All right.
It sounds like y'all have it figured out, and it sounds like a good solution.
It's y'all's decision to make, but I think we have it figured out. So,
The only question I have, which I think I like your solution better, but I'm just asking the questions. Because the electronic meters that we have for our home use are on a 15-minute, has there been any investigation on looking at the main water meter capturing something electronically on a 15-minute or so?
So it's funny you say that. I was actually pondering that question earlier. I don't know if they sell an electronic meter for the master, or if that's even a thing.
Well, so the master meters are City of Austin's meters. They actually, at least one that I'm aware of, BK Woods, is an electronic meter. They actually recently, it was, I think late last year, that they put in a new electronic water meter for that. So that it may be being read electronically. It may not be being read, physically in person, but those are their meters, and Crossroads probably reads them for Austin. They also do work for Austin in that same area. So I don't know. They don't read them, I don't believe, on our account every day, but they do read them every day.
But what I'm talking about is maybe it just being captured out to the cloud or something on a 15-minute basis. Like I can look up my water usage every 15 minutes for the year going back, so I was just wondering if we had that. I still think I like your method of calculation. What I would like is, if it is possible and it doesn't cost money, to have something similar to that, and we could cross-check that against this other and see, yeah, they kind of match up.
A sanity check.
Right.
Yeah, I think the difficulty when we went down this road on the master meter part, the difficulty is you're always having to cross-check against an average usage across the whole system, right? Because you're able to read the master meter, and maybe if it's a huge leak, you can tell, yeah, something's going on in the system. But if we all decide to take a shower at the same time, that's coming out of the system. Like, you can't, it's hard to quantify those numbers unless you're doing it against a system-wide average. So I think that's the difficulty. in
We could
using that.
surely see a spike.
We
if
could
there
see a
was
spike.
right, but could we know that we've captured the correct amount of? And I'll say I'll play around more with this calculator, but it seems pretty accurate, and it.
And once again, I like that method. I'm just investigating if there's a way to even roughly cross-check it. I'm just kind of a
Sure.
numbers walk, and this is
I think
Maybe
I think that's a possibility.
all right.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, it would seem that the presumption would be if you've broken a line, it's pressured at a certain pressure, then it's a matter, and it's a certain diameter, it's a matter of just saying, we are gonna presume this number of gallons will flow through that whatever crack or hole or whatever.
Right.
And it's the best that anybody can do in terms of a measurement, and the easiest,
Right.
ultimately, once you.
And as Ashley said, we're very confident in our personnel in Public Works these days, and their ability to lay eyes on the actual leak and be able to take a quick field measurement, you know, what's the length and what's
It's
the.
a seep or it's a gush.
Correct,
Yeah.
right. So, but yes, that, it's still gonna be in the ballpark no matter what we do because it's behind the meter, but I think
Yeah.
with this system, we could get close enough to justify what the calculation is. Okay, so if that works for council, that's what we'll bring back to you next month. Are you good with what you need, Ms. Wayman?
I believe so.
The
Okay.
only thing I would say is like, utility commission meets in 2 weeks too, so I agree with all this, bring it back, it looks good, I'm gonna go for it, but,
I
just getting
intend to
utility
talk
there-
to the utility commission
Yeah.
about it. I'll fill them in.
Perfect.
And if they have objections, then I will let
If you
council
will
know.
liaise.
Yes, I will liaise.
And bring that back to council.
Sounds
But
kind of dirty, but I will.
I'm okay charging retail rates.
yeah, it would be a retail rate. Cause that's a little bump too, yeah, so that's good. Okay,
A retail
Oh,
rate,
well, at our tiered rate, I guess would be, or our wholesale rate, or the rate that we charge our
The way
customers.
rate we charge our customers, is what I'm saying. I say make it as high as you can make
Yeah.
it, that's comparable.
that's where I
to-
was, I thought we would charge a retail rate, but
Okay.
that's a
but
good
they
thing.
don't have a meter, so how are you gonna do the tiered rate,
I mean, they would hit the
like it'd
tier.
be for a whole month?
They would
right.
hit the
And they would hit
highest
the top
tier
tier
immediately.
almost immediately if it's a big
We
break.
just charge the top tier, we can charge whatever we want in the
We,
ordinance.
we
could
absolutely
say
can. It,
Top tier.
So it would, depending on, we've contemplated, you know, our wholesale rate plus a certain percentage, like, we can do however the council would like to see that.
Mr. Liaison, maybe that would be a good question that you could have a dialogue with utility commission about.
I will do so,
All right,
Very
great.
good.
but, yeah,
Okay,
I can see that. Make it pure.
I've asked Ms. Wayman to go ahead and ask utility commission to post that so y'all can have a robust, as robust a discussion as you want on it.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Okay, with that, we will move off of agenda item number, Ms. Hudson, anything else? Are you good?
That's good, thank
Okay,
you.
without that, we will move on to agenda item number 7, discussion of possible action on an ordinance amending section 32-38 of the City Code of Ordinances related to parking on B Cave Woods Drive. This is an issue that was before you last council meeting. We brought back the actual language for you, and I'll recognize Ms. Wayman to walk you through it.
So we have 2 draft ordinance in the packet. After last month's meeting, it wasn't clear whether the, council would prefer to remove no parking on the entirety, both sides of B Cave Woods Drive, or just the east side, which is where the property in question was. So we have prepared 2 draft ordinances just to kind of give a brief, explanation of why we did what we did. The first ordinance, if my packet will load, is this one allows parking on the east side of B Cave Woods Drive, and there was some discussion about that intersection at B Cave Road. This is gonna be tough to go back and forth. Not being allowed to park between there and that shared driveway. So in the first scenario, we only removed the no parking requirement on the east side from that driveway to where it ends with the city of Austin. So that would keep the no parking requirement from B Cave Road to that driveway and then the entire west side. The second ordinance option in the packet removes removes the entirety of no parking. I'm sorry, I think I had that the other way around. The first one, it removes all no parking requirements on that whole street. The reason why we didn't contemplate leaving that first section where you're at that intersection with B Cave Road Drive, or B Cave Road and B Cave Woods, is because that's already a rule. You're not allowed to park within 30 feet of an intersection. That's already state law. We don't even have to have it marked as no parking for that to be a requirement. So on any street, that's already a requirement. And so if we're going to be pulling all of our no parking from that entire street, didn't really make sense to leave one small section there that we would then have to come and, maintain, make sure our sign was up, paint the curb yellow. So in the option where we're removing all no parking, we took it from the entire thing, knowing that you still would not be legally allowed to park at that intersection within 30 feet. But the other one where we just did part of it, we went ahead and left that section because we'd already have no parking curbs and signs on the other side of the street, so it wouldn't be as hard to go maintain that one section of yellow curb. So we brought both options here today, open to any, amendments or changes
And
to that.
I think the office building owner would prefer it be removed from both sides. I will say, I think personally, it's probably 6 of one, half a dozen another. I don't think people are going to flock to park there in whatever ordinance you choose. So
Right.
do as you wish, Council.
How
Brings
far
up the-
back is the driveway from Bee Caves Road?
I don't have that measurement off the top of my head.
It seemed like it was,
I bet 40 or 50 feet.
that's what I'm guessing.
I'm sure it's
as
more than
well.
30.
Yeah, I know, I'm confident it's more than 30, but
Yeah,
I
that's
haven't
what I'm
measured it.
guessing as well. And so I would be inclined to leaving it from the driveway up to Bee Caves Woods Road, since we don't have to repaint lines and put signage, just to, even though it's a state law I was not aware of until you just spoke it. So I would leave that and then make it from the driveway back into the Austin and give them street parking over there, would be my inclination.
And that would be the second ordinance as it's written, correct?
That's just my,
Okay.
yes, that would be the way I'm leaning.
And I asked the chief if she has any input on that.
Chief, come on up.
That's a good idea.
No, so I did talk to City Administrator Wayman about that as well. Because the other thing is too, is that you have the Arise driveway, and then it goes into the other driveway on Bee Cave Woods. So those driveways are within the 30 feet, so you would not have anybody parking prior to. Do we want congestion on both sides? That's typically up to you. So it's, all we ask is that it maintains that 30 feet. So,
Have you seen any issues with the parking over there?
no,
I guess there's no parking allowed. So
there's no parking allowed, that's
It's just
correct.
to be had at
That's
this
correct.
point.
Yeah.
There isn't, and even when you do even if you remove it from both sides, if you parked on the west side, the office building is, you can't even really access that. You have to walk down the street, walk up the
Correct.
driveway and into that parking,
Correct.
into that office space. And then if you want to park on either side to go to these office buildings that we're talking about, you're walking through the river and through the woods. I'm happy to do this, but I don't
But
think
it's
you're
not
gonna.
convenient.
I don't think it's gonna be all that
Regardless.
convenient.
Yeah,
for
I don't think
anybody,
you're gonna
so,
have congestion there.
Yeah.
And it's very wide. I mean, the street's so wide
It's
that
just like-
driving congestion, I can't imagine being an
Just
issue.
wonder- I just think, why was it? Why is there no parking there?
I
Why
have
is it the
no
way it
clue.
is?
I really don't.
My suspicion is that when Arise was a full-fledged hospital originally,
Mhm.
that the emergency vehicles coming in and out were concerned about getting in and out quickly.
Okay.
That's where I suspect it came from.
Okay.
That's as good a
But-
theory as I've heard.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
still a theory. But I did drive over there, and it's a really wide street, and I did look at it going both directions on Bee Caves, because it's on a curve, but you can see well back into the street,
Right.
more than the 30 feet, so I don't think parking along there would be, I don't want, parking behind the 30-foot line wouldn't be a problem because of
Correct.
the curvature of Bee Caves Road,
Right.
so.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
I would be in favor of removing all the no parking consistent with state law.
Is that a motion?
I think Mr. McDuffie has a motion pending.
I know.
He doesn't, but he can. I'll take either one. Who wants to fight it out?
I move that we go with option 1 and remove the no parking along both sides of Bee Caves Woods Road, consistent with the state law.
You have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Mr. Glasheen. Further discussion. I feel you're odd man out here, but
That's okay.
you okay? Okay.
I don't feel strongly about it. I just expressed my opinion.
Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, council. Moving on to agenda item number 8. Discussion of possible action on ordinance amending section 101-255 of the city's code of ordinances related to the placement of construction fences. This again was an issue which was on your agenda last month, I believe, brought by Ms. Hudson. Council's directive to myself and staff was to bring back a more fully formed ordinance for your consideration. We have done that, and I will recognize Ms. Wayman to walk you through what's in your packet.
So the motion at City Council was, had some specific language that we should change this section of the ordinance to. The reason why we didn't bring it back just on consent agenda with that specific language is we did, kind of find we ran into one issue or thought that there could be possibly an issue in the case that it's not possible to place those fences at that specific or that far from the property line. Just looking out the window, looking at a property that has a retaining wall that's, closer to 15 feet from that intersection, and probably not 10 feet from the curb. I think it could make it that size, but we're looking at if there's a physical obstruction in the way, does council have any appetite to leave it where there is some ability for staff to approve a closer placement that's as far as it can be? If not, we're more than happy to take out this whole section, but we currently have the language that was requested, which is no closer than 10 feet to any street curb and no closer than 15 feet to an intersection. And we've currently got the language, if this distance requirement in this subsection cannot be met, the zoning official may grant an exception to these distance requirements. The exception shall be as restrictive as necessary based on the need for the exception.
Foreseeing some pushback on sentence 2, we added sentence 3, which was to make sure that it is as restrictive as necessary.
Mm-hmm.
That was all for you.
My issue is how do you enforce that, and how, that's a very,
I understand. That's why we added sentence 3.
we can't possibly put the fence there,
But that's
because why?
And it has to be approved by the zoning official.
Yeah. We would be the ones who would.
Well,
So
then
this is an opt-in. So
Put
before
that
it
all
was.
on Nikki to have to,
Well, I understand that, and which is why it was written the other way to begin with. But
well, the retaining walls and any of those things, then you get into the whole issue of what can you build in the right of way, so that's a whole nother item on our agenda.
Mm-hmm.
That you shouldn't have those things in the right of way.
I agree, it's going to be sentence 2 and 3 will fall upon Nikki or ourselves to interpret. However, if we don't have that, we're going to be in a more difficult position when we come upon an issue that's difficult, and we acknowledge, yes, you can't. There is a physical obstruction which is not going to allow us to meet the code, and then we're going to have an even more difficult situation, and then either have to come back to you and talk about it, or not have a fence, or like if we don't have some flexibility, that's on us. But because before it was really more of an opt-in as opposed to the way it's drafted now, which is we are the only ones that can allow you to opt out.
Well, except it doesn't really. It says cannot be met. In whose opinion?
In our opinion, or in
Well, then-
Nikki's opinion.
Then
Sorry.
I would word that say if the distance requirements in the subsection cannot be met in the opinion or in the
As determined by.
as determined by the zoning official, an exception may be granted.
We can do that.
Because
all.
that way you don't
Very appropriate.
you don't let the contractor going, oh
Yep.
no, it's not possible.
I totally fine. Would be fine with that.
I-
So it would read if the distance requirements in this subsection cannot be met as determined by the zoning official.
Should be building official, not zoning official.
That's Is that right?
Whoever is gonna make the decision.
Well, we
By
don't-
the city,
We don't have a zoning official,
Yeah,
right?
by the,
Right.
by the
Right.
building official, yeah. Can we, I know not to rush council, but while this is fresh on our mind, can you make that motion as we've discussed it so that I've got that in front of us? So if we have more discussion, we can, but we have it on the record.
Okay. Also a question, and this was not proposed in here, but do we need to have anything in here to include water meters in the, where it says such that no fire hydrant or wastewater lift station is obstructed?
Well, we do have, I mean, we have backyard water meters too, so
Okay.
I don't know if maybe that's why it was left out originally. I think ideally it would be nice if they were out if it was possible, or they give us the code to the, gate, which happens
Okay.
sometimes, so.
While it's fresh on our mind, do you mind making the,
I can do that.
Okay.
I move approval of the ordinance as drafted with the revision to, section A4. The second sentence to say, if the distance requirements in this subsection cannot be met as determined by the building official, an exception to these distance requirements may be granted.
you've heard the motion, council. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Hudson, a second by Mr. McDuffie. Now you can talk more about it, now that we've got it on the record. But you don't have to.
Suggest that cannot practically be met. Because, I mean, you say it can't be met. If you tell me you can't do something, I'll tell you to try harder. Anyway, that's a friendly amendment offered, but you certainly don't need it if you don't want it. I don't care.
I think we have what we would need from an enforcement
Okay.
perspective. I appreciate that. I think the interpretation will still be along those lines. Yes, sir.
I think this is an improvement from last week. I like the new language in there. I think still for me, I'm like, I just don't, like, we want fences because we want all the stuff to like not be one thing, not to be visible. The other thing is like, obviously safety. We don't want people to be able to walk in on the construction site. But I still kind of just wonder, is 10 feet like too much, and how's this going to work out? So that's why I'm kind of like still a no on this one, but it sounds like it'll get through. We'll see what happens.
As the author of the first language that we're striking, I tend to agree with you, but it's no longer my call. So we'll do the best we can with what we've got here. So.
Well, I mean, if you want to offer an alternative when it comes up for 5 feet or something, we could vote on it.
With all the construction that we have going on, with all the water projects and everything else, they are using the right-of-way. And the right-of-way is typically 10 feet, which means that the construction fence cannot be in the right-of-way, so that the right-of-way is available for use however it's needed, and the fence doesn't have to be moved. And it also allows a car to be backing out of a driveway and to have an unobstructed view of the road without getting their tail out in the road. 5 feet doesn't give you that.
Okay. You've convinced me.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. With that, you have a motion before you. You have a second. Hearing no further discussion, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no.
No.
Being 4 ayes, 1 no, motion carries. Thank you, council. Moving on to agenda item number 9. Discussion and possible action with regard to a proposed zoning amendment to prohibit rental of outdoor amenities in the residential zoning district. This is an issue that has been discussed by this council previously, and this is Ms. Brown's agenda item that's coming back before you. I'll recognize Ms. Brown to open up.
Yes. This item was on the council's agenda at the last meeting. We requested that it be brought to the zoning commission, the Park Planning and Zoning, for their consideration. And I was at least thinking the ordinance, drafted ordinance would be available to take to planning and zoning, but it was not, they didn't actually vote on the proposed ordinance. So it's now coming back to us. I think we want what Sarah had raised at the last city council meeting, that the ordinance should include not only short-term rentals of amenities, but any rental of amenities separate and apart from rental of the premise on the same lot. And so what we need now is draft ordinance language. We need to see if that's the consensus of the council, and then to get draft ordinance language so we can adopt an ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Ms. Wayman has, well, I'll recognize Ms. Wayman.
I think she mostly covered it. That was our understanding, was that council wanted to ask P&Z if they felt like we should include additional, first off, if the short-term rental of amenities was something that should be brought up or taken up, as well as not short-term, longer-term rental of amenities. They seemed to agree. They discussed even at their meeting bringing it to their next public hearing that was regularly scheduled. There seemed to be a consensus that they didn't want it necessarily us to go out of our way and do a new public hearing, but if there was going to be a public hearing on something else, to bring it back. But I will say we did not have that posted for action. That was on staff's part. We really thought we were just asking them if they wanted it to be taken up. So we didn't post it for action, so they didn't actually make a motion on that. So city council tonight could direct, how they would like us to move forward with this draft, with a draft ordinance.
Well, and I think the question beyond short-term rental of amenities alone is whether whether a city's permitted to prohibit rental of amenities separate and apart, a long-term rental of amenities separate and apart from rental of the premises. I don't think we could prohibit a rental of amenities with the premise, a long-term rental of amenities with the premise. But so I think what we're actually trying to do is to prohibit any kind of rental of amenities on a basis other than along with rental of the premises. Short-term rental or long-term rental separate and apart from the premise, but we don't have language to that effect, and we haven't had Charlie weigh in on it. So if we can do that, then I think the action to be taken tonight is to request that Charlie draft that ordinance, and that we ask P&Z to consider that ordinance at their next, consider that ordinance for posting for a public hearing at P&Z, because it would have to go through P&Z at a public hearing.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I'm thinking is the action to be considered.
That's fine with us, Counselor.
Yeah, I'm perfectly comfortable with that approach. And let me repeat to make sure I understand. We would like an ordinance that prohibits any rental of amenities that is not associated with the long-term rental of the premises itself. So if someone lives in the premises, they can't separately rent out an amenity associated with the premises. Yes, we can bring that forward to the next planning and zoning.
And take that to planning and zoning, and then let them look at that language. And then some version would or wouldn't come before this council.
Yeah, and they would,
They would fiddle with it.
well, I think what their concern is, do we want to have do we want to go to the expense of a public hearing on this ordinance alone? There's some other changes that will be coming up
on other things
soon.
Oh,
It's not a question of whether they want to do it or not. It's, whether they're in favor of
grouping
it.
Oh, I see.
It's a question of, do we want a public hearing on this
Got it.
by itself? So
Okay.
that's I think what we want to do is to ask Charlie to, or pass a resolution requesting that Charlie draft an ordinance to that effect, and that it be taken to planning and zoning for consideration.
Got it. Okay. Happy to happy to accept a motion to do what we've just discussed, or I think we've got the direction and we're just happy to do it if that's okay with council. Okay?
Very good.
All right, we will do that and
Great.
get that to,
I'm sorry, to clarify, are we doing it at their next public hearing possible, or are we waiting until there's more items for a public hearing? That's my,
I think you get it to, I think you go ahead and get the ordinance, the sample ordinance draft. Go ahead and get it to them, and then they take it up
They decide when
and where.
if
Okay.
and when to schedule a public hearing on it.
okay,
Yep.
okay.
Okay. With that, we will move off of agenda item number 9 and move on to agenda item number 10, discussion and possible action on an ordinance amending section 1-14 of the city's code of ordinances. Ms. Wayman?
This is an item that came out of last month's city council meeting. City Attorney Zek had prepared an ordinance last month that went through our enforcement ordinances and the various places in our code where enforcement and penalties were included, and removed anything that was unnecessary or not consistent with state law. There was a question about this section, and it was determined by City Attorney that it is not, it is somewhat similar to what is in state law, but is not completely consistent with what is in state law, and so the recommendation is to remove it from our code of ordinances. And that is what the draft ordinance in front of you does.
Okay, thank you. Questions? It was Mr. Robinson.
I remember discussing this last meeting, but it seemed like we changed some amounts, I think. Weren't some of the penalties increased?
That was separate.
Okay,
That was separate from this
okay.
issue.
Okay.
Yeah,
And so what you're saying is striking the section,
letter I. Mhm.
in section 2, the letter I, that paragraph.
Correct. It's somewhat, again, to restate, there's some inconsistencies between what state law mandates and what this says. So the court's gonna have to comply with the general state law requirements regardless of whether or not it's in our ordinances.
Mhm.
And since we have some inconsistencies, rather than just try to match it up, just strike it. That's my recommendation.
All right.
So we can't, we couldn't order someone to do community service instead
There,
of-
I apologize, I do not have the state law memorized, but there are
Yeah.
certain circumstances where the court, when there is a financial inability to pay, that the court has to provide and allow for certain types of relief.
Right, but it seemed like we were striking that, that's why I was confused.
Well, this applies only to a nuisance violation.
Mhm.
And so I'm not sure we would have a nuisance violation where we would want that nuisance to be corrected by community service, to be paid off by community service. You could maybe come up with one, but it seemed ill-advised to create a right to community service. This, and the way it's worded, it created a right. The defendant had a right to request community service rather than the court having the discretion to award community service. So I think we're better off matching with whatever state law is and whatever options our municipal judge has than to create a right for a nuisance violator to work it off through community service.
And it causes confusion if you're having
Yes.
to try to go between
does.
the two. Yeah.
So I would move adoption of ordinance 2024-03-20-10.
You have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Ms. Hudson. Further discussion, council?
Yeah, I think I voted against this last time, so I'm probably gonna stick with that.
It's at your discretion. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Is that,
I'm an aye.
you're an aye? Okay, yeah.
Hey,
Threw me for a
good.
loop there at the end. So, there being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Okay, with that, we will move on to agenda item number 11, discussion and possible action to adopt a schedule for a joint public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council and special meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council to consider amendments to the Commercial Zoning Code ordinances to implement the comprehensive plan. This is an item that we talked about last month. This is Ms. Brown's item that she's putting back before you this evening. We have done some work as we said we would. I will recognize Ms. Brown and then recognize Ms. Wayman to walk you through the schedule.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item would address scheduling for the upcoming consideration of changes to the commercial zoning code associated with the comprehensive plan. At the last meeting, we debated the question of whether to hold a joint hearing with planning and zoning on these code changes. We've then conferred with planning and zoning. They would prefer a joint meeting. We also discussed the proposed dates that are in the schedule that Ashley developed for us for both the joint public hearing on these zoning changes, plus special meetings to be held by the Planning and Zoning Commission to issue their report on the proposed changes, and then special hearings to be held by the City Council to consider the report from the Planning and Zoning. So what the plan that's being proposed is would have a joint public hearing on April 24th of Planning and Zoning and the City Council. Then Planning and Zoning would meet May 1 and May 8 to issue their recommendation on the zoning changes, and then the City Council would meet on May 22nd and May 29 to consider the report from Planning and Zoning. And I'll say, right now, it looks like the proposed ordinance changes, redlined, comprise about 35 pages of material, so it's a heavy load to try and do it in one meeting, and it's a heavy load to try and do it along with the City Council agenda. And so that's why we're proposing special meetings at both Planning and Zoning and City Council. Plus, we have attendance issues through the summer for Planning and Zoning and the Council from time to time, so we're also trying to get it done before the summer. So that is what the proposal is, and the action to be taken tonight would be to adopt this schedule for those hearings, public hearings and Planning and Zoning meetings and City Council meetings.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. That was a good walkthrough. Ms. Wayman, do you want to add anything related to the schedule?
I think everything was pretty much covered. P&Z, we do have a confirmed quorum for all of the P&Z related meetings. So P&Z can be at the joint public hearing as well as both of their meetings. As of right now, we have a confirmed quorum.
I'm not as important for these. I'm happy to be there. I do know of a couple of these that I'm going to have travel conflicts with, but I'll do my best to either rearrange those or be here, but I'm not needed for the quorum, so just putting you on notice.
So if these are special meetings, we have to have 4 council members to be a quorum?
Yes.
Yes, I believe so. Okay. And I'm sorry I missed. Did you make a motion?
I move we approve the proposed schedule for review and adoption of the proposed commercial code amendments in accordance with the comprehensive plan.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Ms. Hudson. Further discussion, council?
And I guess we don't know the times we'll do on these. We'll probably do them in the evening or something, I guess.
Would be most likely in the evenings.
Sure.
Maybe a little earlier than 7. It would just have to, we'll probably be a case-by-case basis.
P&Z generally meets at 6, so their meetings will likely continue to be at 6, and then we can discuss that for the joint hearing and the 2 council meetings.
Okay, further discussion, council? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, council. Will we post this somewhere?
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll try to get this somewhere.
And we'll go ahead and do draft meetings in our meeting calendar, so when you go to our website, you'll see the upcoming meetings. They won't have agendas
that's a good
yet,
way to
but
do
we'll
it,
go
yeah.
ahead and get those scheduled out so people know to expect those coming.
Okay.
And we'll send out calendar invites for everything.
Oh, that's most helpful.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. All right, moving on to agenda item number 12, discussion and possible action to set a joint public hearing for the City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission to consider proposed amendments to the city's commercial zoning code ordinances to implement the comprehensive plan. This is phase 2 of the last agenda item, and I'll recognize Ms. Wayman.
Yes, our city code does require that the city council on its own motion has to establish the date of a joint public hearing. So because now that schedule was approved, we will also need a motion to establish that April 24th, 2024 joint public hearing. It'd be best if we had a time on that as well. We've proposed 6, but we're open to other additional times in the evening.
Happy to talk about it, or happy to recognize Ms. Brown for a motion.
I move that we set the date of April 24, 2024 at 6 p.m. for a joint public hearing of City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission on proposed amendments to the city's commercial zoning code ordinances consistent with the comprehensive plan.
You have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Ms. Hudson. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. There being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, council. Okay, thank you, council. Moving off of agenda item number 12, moving on to agenda item number 13, discussion and possible action regarding the June city council meeting date. Ms. Wayman.
The regular June city council meeting date is on a city holiday, which is Juneteenth. We have provided a calendar in the packet. The rest of that week, staff is out at the city management conference, and so it would be difficult to have a meeting later in that week or the following week. So we are proposing either moving the date of the June council meeting up a day to Tuesday, or the previous week, or really, most of the earlier parts of June are available if there are other times. But just thought we'd get this out ahead of planning for summer schedules. We don't necessarily need to make a decision tonight, but it would just be good to have in the next couple of months before people plan their vacations.
Some of us have already planned vacations, so just choose your dates wisely, council, because I will be somewhere between here and New York driving. So
When,
What about on the 12th? Maybe on the
when will
12th?
you be?
I'll be back the week of the 24th, so it's that next week, I guess. I'll be gone the week before.
So you're gone the week of the 17th?
Gone the week of the 17th, and yes, gone the week of the 17th.
But not the week of the 10th.
I'm looking. I'll be here the beginning. I'll still be here on the 12th. So that Wednesday before.
I move we have the regularly scheduled June city council meeting on the 12th of June at 7 o'clock.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Ms. Hudson and a second by Mr. Robinson. I'm honored that you want me here so badly. I was really fine with turning the gavel over to you. But, so.
The
gonna have a
18th is my
wild party.
birthday, and I don't want to
Oh, okay,
I don't
so
want
it
to
was-
have to lead
I
a
see.
meeting on my birthday.
All right,
so-
that's fair. I'm glad to. It's not all about me.
That's right.
Okay, so you have a motion and a second, council, to move it to June 12th. Was that?
Was there a time on? We say that we stayed a time?
7
Okay,
o'clock.
we will have budget by that time, so it'll probably be 6 o'clock for the budget workshop.
Oh,
Okay.
It's the only amendment.
Well, I said the regularly
The
scheduled
regular,
city
yes.
council at 7
I
o'clock.
think we're perfect.
All right, great. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
aye.
Opposed say no. Bring 5 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Thank you, council. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 14. Discussion and possible action on an ordinance adopting the International Fuel Gas Code. We were fortunate to have this issue brought up to us by, there's Jerry, by Jerry. He was doing some due diligence on his own and brought this to our attention. I will recognize Ms. Wayman to walk you through it.
Yes, so the International Fuel Gas Code is something we have not currently adopted in our ordinances. We were advised by our building official that we have adopted it by reference because we have adopted the International Building Code and the International Plumbing Code, which both reference the International Fuel Gas Code. So by reference, we have adopted it, and in practice, they inspect per the International Fuel Gas Code. So luckily it won't be a big transition to have adopted this code, but they did say they agree it is a good idea to adopt this code that allows us to make local amendments to the building code if we would like to, or to this International Fuel Gas Code. And so we have proposed an ordinance here that does adopt the International Fuel Gas Code, and it is here for council's discussion.
It's a belt and suspenders thing. Council, it's a good practice, and we probably should have it on the books. And it's pretty straightforward. It would be added to the other codes that we've already adopted. Happy to take a motion, or?
I move adoption of proposed ordinance 2024-03-20-14.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown and a second by Mr. McDuffie. Is there discussion, council? Please don't ask me any technical questions. Good. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion
I have
carries.
one
Yes.
further remark, that
Sure.
we already have a contribution from our newest member of the Planning and Zoning Commission,
There you go, Jerry.
Jerry Fleming, who's
Yeah.
here tonight.
Started reading things.
Well,
Yeah.
I was hoping to avoid that, but I just want to commend the staff and the mayor for getting that item on the agenda so quickly and promptly. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Jerry.
appreciate it. Thanks for reading things. It's helpful. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 15. Discussion and possible action on amendments to the city's fee schedule to add fees for permits for construction in city rights of way. Ms. Wayman, if you would walk us through this one.
This is a proposed resolution to add fees for permits for construction in the city's right-of-way. The reason we currently don't have this in our city code is generally when Texas Gas or Austin Energy or someone else is doing work in the right-of-way, we have a franchise agreement with them or another agreement. In Texas Gas case, we get the franchise fees from it, so in turn we don't charge for any permits or reviewing of their when they would like to do work in the right-of-way. Because Google Fiber will be coming in and we do not have something like that in our agreement with them, they are expecting to pay for the review. It will likely be lengthier and a bigger process to review those. And so we are requesting to add fees for permits for construction in city rights of way to our fee schedule so that we can adequately pass those on to Google Fiber. We don't believe there will be a lot of staff time involved with it, just getting passing the permits on to our engineers. So we are proposing a fee of $150 to cover that staff time plus the actual cost of engineering review fees. So the engineers would send us their billing hours and we would just pass those on to Google Fiber.
We have a rough estimate of how many hours or how much that total will be.
We do not. I'm not sure that we've never really done one of these before. And KFA, they might have reviewed something similar for other cities, so we may be able to get one. But in general, for most of our engineering review fees that we pass on to applicants, we don't normally get a lot of. We don't really have any pushback because it's generally just getting the review taken
I'm
care
a
of.
little confused because we did adopt a franchise fee agreement with Google Fiber, and so I'm not sure how is that different than the other franchise fee agreements you referenced?
It just doesn't stipulate that there are no permit fees. The other agreements we have stipulate that we don't pay for those. Like Texas Gas, for example, doesn't pay for their permit fees or to apply to get a permit in the city. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I actually took a look at it's a license agreement that we
Mhm.
have with Google Fiber. They call it a license agreement.
Right.
But it does provide the right for us to charge these kind of fees. It just doesn't set the amount.
Mhm.
And then it also will impose a fee of 1% of gross revenues as the licensing fee. So, but that won't take over until till they're getting revenue in. The system's installed and they have revenue. So I think it's consistent with our license agreement with Google. We just need to set an amount we're going to charge them.
Yeah, and to credit to Google, they were.
Yes.
I mean, they were being helpful. I mean, they were doing the right thing, and it was really that the discussions with them is what kind of brought it to our attention. So.
I think it's honorable they brought it to our attention, and they're doing it with Round Rock and Austin and Travis County
Right.
and everyone else, so.
Yep. Okay. Happy to take a motion.
I move adoption of the proposed amendment to the city's fee schedule to add fees for permits for construction in city right-of-way.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown, second by Ms. Hudson. Discussion, further discussion, council? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, council. Moving on to agenda item number 16, discussion and possible action on a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission regarding circular driveways connecting 2 streets on a corner lot. I will recognize Ms. Wayman.
This came as a recommendation. It actually started in the CRCRC and then was recommended to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Planning and Zoning Commission talked about this at their meeting last month. And they did recommend that these changes to the ordinance regarding circular driveways be made. The recommendation that was made was, so currently we have just, we do not allow circular driveways or continuous driveways with more than one curb cut on corner lots, basically where they connect 2 streets. So the recommendation is circular driveways connecting 2 streets on a corner lot shall be allowed, provided that the edge of the driveway closest to intersecting street corner may be no closer than 30 feet to the intersecting corner. That 30 feet recommendation was actually came as a suggestion from our police chief regarding line of sight at intersections. We don't allow parking within that 30 feet, and so it makes sense to also space out those driveways if we're going to allow them. And so that was the recommendation. And then Chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission and CRCRC is here, Dave Bench, if anybody has any questions about that. And then so also just to mention, this is the first recommendation that has made its way from CRCRC to Planning and Zoning Commission and now to the City Council. So we don't necessarily have a policy or a practice for how those how those are going to go and how the City Council would like to see those recommendations brought forward. So we thought we would bring one and talk about it, and then maybe have a bigger discussion at some point about, what the process is. Do you want these as they're coming one by one? How does City Council would like to see those coming from the CRCRC?
There's your layout.
And this is not a zoning change, so it doesn't require a public. Here, okay.
That's
Correct. Also made it a little easier for this one.
Well, and a question I have, do we need an actual ordinance change in order to adopt this, or can we just direct that there be an ordinance change?
I think it would be best to direct, that we bring back an ordinance and we can put it on the consent agenda next month. That would be
That would be,
a recommendation.
Yes.
Mhm.
it should be pretty straightforward in the drafting of it. So.
Mhm. Just as with any, recommendation coming forward, we're not interpreting that we should be then immediately putting them into ordinances and bringing them because we assumed that City Council would like to discuss. This one is, of course, pretty straightforward and pretty simple, so we're happy to bring that back next month.
This is kind of our test balloon.
What is,
Well-
go ahead.
Oh, you started, go ahead.
Well, I was just trying to understand the ordinance. It says the center line, provided that the center lines of the driveways are no closer to each other than 35 feet. What does that mean? Maybe I'm just,
That's what we have right now.
oh, okay.
If the circular drive has both
Oh, okay.
On one side.
on the same street.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
My understanding of the reason why we had this restriction in our code to start with is because it is not advisable to have a connection from one street to the other because of cut-through traffic. Because it provides a means for people to potentially avoid a stop sign, to cause confusion in the intersections if you have people that can cut through. I know that we do have a couple in the city where that is there, and people take it as public access and walk through or ride bikes through or do whatever through people's yards from one street to another. I think it's really potentially hazardous with all of the kids that we have on bikes and e-bikes and everything else, if they can cut through somebody's driveway from one street to the next. And
Robot deliveries.
But wouldn't that be whoever's home it is to decide whether they want to have that or not?
not if it's a public safety hazard and you have kids popping into the street from, from somebody's property.
Okay.
Anyway, that was my understanding of why we didn't allow it, and I checked with a traffic engineer who also agreed that that is not an advisable practice
Okay.
to allow that, so.
Council, and I will recognize anyone who wants to speak on the issue.
Right now, the current ordinance says the edge of the driveway can't be closer to the side property line than 5 feet, so that's basically a 5 feet setback from the street corner, right?
No,
No.
from the side, from the side,
From the side property line.
from the property line, yeah, not from the street.
What if it's a corner?
You can't have a driveway 5 feet from the corner.
It's basically looking at just section 4.
Yeah,
Okay.
the proposal is just to strike section 428-74 and replace it with the language in the packet. So those other sections would remain as far as the recommendation from P&Z. And I will say this has not been through legal review. So as we're drafting the ordinance, we would also run this through legal review.
Okay, well, anyway, I was just confused by the edge is not closer than 5 feet from the side property line, because you could have a circular driveway now that comes out 5 feet from the corner, it seems like. Huh?
Why don't you, if you want to come up, Dave, you can. Well, if that's okay, Councilman.
Yeah,
Okay,
of course.
come on up. Trying to avoid group discussion. Hold on. Identify yourself.
I will. Dave Bench, 1 Randolph. I think what would have been useful is in your packet to have had this thing that was presented to the P&Z, and it illustrates what it is we're trying to do with this change. And it is what you had asked, Councilman, was whether or not a circular driveway could be up to 5 feet away from. I don't know that. I do know that 5 feet from a property line is permitted, but from a corner, I don't think so. I'd be surprised.
I just don't see how it's prohibited under the current rule, that's all.
Okay. Well, this particular thing that we're asking for
Right.
is permitted specifically. Or excuse me, is prohibited specifically. It is actually, laid out in the ordinance that driveways connecting 2 streets are just plain not allowed.
Can you circulate?
I'd be happy to. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll share that too.
Oh, that would be useful.
Yeah, I think this would be.
Good idea.
This will help a whole lot.
Yeah.
Okay. I also want to call attention that, this is the first CRC recommendation that's coming up through the system. And what you're going to get here in a minute is kind of the template for how we expect to be presenting. I know that, Ashley had mentioned that we're still looking for process that's going to take us all the way from the beginning to end. And this is, as Mayor said, we're floating a balloon here. It's a trial balloon. But what we're trying to do is to illustrate what the public had told us through our survey, interpret what it is that we think they're telling us, and turn that into something that is actionable. We do have good public support for this change, and we've gotten a lot of comments in support of it. And when I last approached City Council about this, particular thing, whenever we did our preliminary discussion of recommendations, the question came from City Council as to whether or not we had checked with the police on this, and we had not. And since then, we have had some discussion with with Chief Munoz, and it was actually her suggestion to put the 30-foot requirement on here, which we thought was a good idea. What we were asking for originally was to strike the that portion of the ordinance on driveways altogether, but rather than that, we're bringing it in such a way that we believe is a safe way of presenting this.
Was the 30-foot, how far back parking is prohibited? Is that
Correct. That's state law requires it to
That is
be.
the state law that you cannot park or stand within 30 feet of a traffic control device, which would be your stop signs.
Right, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, that explains it a lot better. I do like your drawing here, that's helpful, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay, council, further discussion, happy to have it, happy to take a motion, happy to do whatever, don't want to jinx it, but we're doing awesome on time.
Motion to approve the, I guess to have council bring back a draft ordinance consistent with this request. Is that what we're doing?
You have a motion by Mr.
Say that very well. I'll
Glashie.
let somebody else say that.
No,
A second.
you gave a motion, I'm restating
All
it,
right.
you've already done
We're
it.
still discussing, I mean, I would like
Yeah, we're about to
still
discuss it more, but you have you have a motion to approve the, recommendation as presented. You have a second by Mr. Robinson, and we'll open it back up for discussion.
Okay. I'm kind of confused because it said, should we reconsider code limitations placed on? So to me, that question, the way I would interpret it when I read it was, should we look at it? Not, and a positive response to that is not necessarily saying, are you in favor of it? It's just saying, yeah, you should look at it. But that's my interpretation of the question and the way it was. So when you said the community is in favor of this, I'm just wondering, where's that? How are we getting that from this?
Okay. Dave Bench, One Randolph. May I call attention to how the numbers present themselves here on the top of this sheet that show that should we reconsider the limitations, 156 or 57% said yes, 112 or 40% said no, and then there were 3% with no response. There were 71 comments, and 48 of those comments were for, and I can tell you that if you read what those comments were, they were primarily around what we think that the people who are asking for this were doing it for safety reasons, and we believe that it's a good idea. The rest of them, the balance of those that weren't that were, well, it's somebody's property, why shouldn't they be allowed to do it? Okay, and that's where the public opinion comes from. Yes, some of our language in the survey could have been tightened up. I agree with you. Instead of being considered, we could have said, do you want it this way or that? But we also wanted to stimulate discussion through our questions, what do you think about all this stuff? And we did get that in spades. So,
Thank you. I wasn't trying to criticize the CRCRC. Or how you guys phrase things. It's just, I was more saying I would interpret it a certain way.
Thank you, Dave, again. Yeah, Alec?
Yeah, are we gonna get a chance to see
Sure.
some of these comments? Because I think that would have been to the point there, being able to read some of these things could probably also give us a little bit of.
If that's, that indeed, that's kind of what we're going through here is what is it you want to see? We are in the process of creating summaries of every question in the survey and the numbers, what we perceive the comments that are associated with the question, what we think they are, what we are recommending, and then a chat GPT reading on all of the comments that are associated with that question, not only all together, but the yes and why, and the no and why. I don't have that with me. We could have gotten that here for you this evening if we'd have known that you'd wanted to talk about it this way. But it's quite good.
I just remember like the last.
Pretty good stuff.
When we went through like the commercial, I just feel like we had a report and we had like, we saw all the comments. You could go through and see all that. I was just wondering if we're going to get.
We will
if we're gonna
get
some
that.
of
You will get that,
Okay.
yeah. If this is premature because we don't have enough filler here, I'm good with that.
Well, that's kind of where I'm at, just from two standpoints. And first off, I don't want for us to pop your first test balloon, because I don't think that's a good look. But back to Sarah's point where she talked to a traffic engineer and they have concerns about this, like as much as I want this to reflect the desires of the community, I also want to keep the community safe. And so I think we need to investigate that further and get a lot more information about that before we can make a determination. Just because people want it, people want a lot of things that could perhaps have unintended consequences and be a bad idea. So I don't want to just, I want to respect the desires of the community, but at the same time, perhaps do that in dialogue with educating the community that some of their desires may not be quite as good an idea as they think they are, that type of thing.
My point of view will be consistent with Phil's. I'd like to see a little bit, I would like to consider this further.
Okay.
Also, are the survey results posted online? I mean, one way to handle being able to see the results would be to have those available online on the website.
They are in the share file on the CRCRC website, but it maybe doesn't stand out as well as it could. So we will find a better way to post those.
It's kind of a careful what you ask for.
Okay.
It's not an elegant presentation of the
okay.
results, but if you want to spend a couple of hours looking at what it is, you can see all the comments are there.
There's also like I think a couple meetings ago there was a presentation that was included in the packet. So I know you could like go back and see like that summary presentation. It might be good to have that posted somewhere as well.
Well,
If it
it is part of the minutes of this.
The what?
It is part of the minutes of,
Oh, okay.
but yeah, if you, I guess
in
what's
the packet?
ultimately, I guess all of our material is going to find itself on the website.
Okay. The share file is accessible from the website. I haven't actually gone there to look
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah.
I'll send out a link and we'll take a look at if it could be presented in an easier way to access. 'Cause I think that's a good
Yeah.
point.
Better get yourself a cup of coffee.
And I would ask, if possible, if you've got a traffic engineer as a comment on it, if they could give us something in writing or even a reference to the traffic engineering handbook, it would be helpful. Just because some traffic engineer has an opinion doesn't impress me much as a accidental error without a citation.
Is this for me?
No, that's for Ms. Hudson.
Okay, all right. We all have homework.
So you-
Okay,
which
council.
document?
Okay.
I don't think it's gonna.
Happy to, so you do have a motion and a second.
Oh.
I suspect that if I were you, I would withdraw said motion and second, but we'll proceed however you want to.
Seconded it. You want to withdraw your second? We'll withdraw the motion.
Okay. Again, happy to do it however you want, but I can count. So, okay. With that, we will get you this additional information and work with Dave, and we'll bring it back to you at an appropriate time. All right, with that, we'll move off of agenda item number 16, move on to agenda item number 17, discussion regarding what is allowed to be constructed in city rights-of-way. This is a topic that we discussed last month. You gave us some homework to do. We've done that homework, and I'll recognize Ms. Wayman.
We have attached a document that was created by Kay Freese and Associates because they generally do all of our reviews and are responsible for enforcing our code as to what can and cannot be put in the right of way. And so we have attached that document. It seems to be a little more in draft format. I think we could possibly have a little bit more information added to this as to as for explanation, but it appears to me that the items that are, you know, bolded in this report are things that they are saying are allowed to be constructed in the city right of way. If my computer would pull it up, that would be great. But we're happy to, you know, take any questions. It might be something that we could, you know, jot some questions down to pass on to K. Freese and Associates. They were not able to be here tonight to discuss this.
Yeah, if it's not enough, we're happy to bring you
Mhm.
back more. This gives you this is certainly in the ballpark of what we think you asked for, but happy to give you more. If you would like, or in a different format, just let us know.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question,
Yes, ma'am.
and this may go to staff, but when I looked at the ordinance, all of section 28, which deals with rights of way, and section 28-20B, which is the lead-off section dealing with rights of way. Subsection B says, no person may perform any construction, installation, or maintenance of facilities in the right-of-way without first obtaining a construction permit except as provided herein. Are we doing that? What about mailboxes? What about sidewalks? What about anything that crosses the right-of-way? Are we doing that, or what are we actually, do we get a permit? When do you require that a permit be issued for anything in the right-of-way?
So this section specifically refers to, you know, like Texas Gas, for example, things that are working in the right of way. If you're doing a driveway or something, you have a driveway permit that, you know, talks about crossing.
It's absolute. The language is absolute. It's anything that's constructed in the right of way. Now, I don't know if we're doing that, but I do want to understand what we are doing. This is section 2820.
I mean, this question occurred to me as well, and I know back 10 years ago when I built a home, and I've since seen, I mean, I think the example you use of the mailboxes is a good one, right? Like the language is absolute, but the practice has never.
What is the practice?
The practice, as long as I have been around, has never been to require anything for like a mailbox or anything like that.
Well,
I'm not saying that it's a good.
What do we require a permit for right of way? What do we do today in terms of for what facilities do we require a permit?
This would be what is defined here as, let me find, so where in their report they talk about, they start at section 28-20. So this section, this 28 generally refers to pipes, interducts, valves, you know, bores, trenches, handholds, manholes, switchgear, transformers. That's the kind of things that this section deals with. When it comes to a mailbox, I can't say I know how those have been handled. If they are doing a driveway, they have a driveway permit, and to my knowledge, I don't believe we're asking them to get a right-of-way permit on top of that driveway permit. And I think, you know, based on the, you know, what they're showing here as what is the public right-of-way, what is the definition of it, though they do say it's not in our city code, but it's just a generally applied definition. It would be the area on, below, or above a public roadway, highway, street, public sidewalk, alley, waterway, or public utility easement. That, to me, that means not every property would necessarily have a true right-of-way. If your property line goes all the way to the curb, it would mean to me that you know, it's not an area above a city, you know, a public roadway, street, sidewalk, alley, waterway, that you know.
These definitions aren't from our code.
That's right. Understand.
And then if you go to section 2820, where K. Freese just lists, you know, pipe size, bores, trenches, etc. If you go to subpart, the actual code where that information comes from, the first paragraph is that you've got to put in your application the approximate location and route of all facilities to be constructed or installed. So I don't think we've got a really good assessment of what our current code does here.
Well,
And I still want to know, what do we require a permit for? Do we require any permits for use of right-of-way? And if so, is it just utility facilities? Or is there, is it drainage facilities? Is it fences? Is it, what do we do currently?
Well, the reason that I brought this up last month was because when I looked at what the requirements were for construction in the right-of-way, it is only focused on commercial-type utility stuff, and there is nothing in our code about what a property owner, a resident of whatever, can put in the right-of-way. And so we have things that are being built in the right-of-way that we don't have any restrictions on, and I think that we should not be allowing drainage structures or things that can be knocked down, eliminated by somebody who is doing utility work in the right-of-way, that are necessary to deal with drainage or something else on the property. So we need to have, I mean, what we got from K-Freeze, maybe what was asked of them, but it does not address in any way what I was concerned about in the first place, was that we need to have something that addresses what residents can put in the right-of-way or not put in the right-of-way, and that we need to clarify that.
Doesn't 2823 say that, and maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but it says landscaping, berms, and fencing must be approved in advance by the city if it's gonna be placed in the right-of-way? That's in there, right?
Where are you
Well,
reading
but-
from?
I'm looking
So
at
what are the
section
guidelines?
2823.
I think you're well right.
28.
We got no
23.
guidelines.
But let's just start with the language of the statute, if we could, though. 2823, where it says it says placement of all above-ground facilities in the public right-of-way or public utility easements must be approved in advance by the city. Landscaping, berms, and fencing must be approved in advance by the city. I'm sure we're not even approving people's landscaping in the first 15 feet, right?
Right. I mean,
But it says that they're supposed to get approval in advance.
Well, we shouldn't have any fences in the right-of-way either, because fences are not allowed to be any closer than 15 feet from the street, so
But
they should.
driveways, I mean, they go right through the right-of-way.
Right, but the fences, which you list
But I mean,
fences,
you
and
say
that should,
if we want to ban anything that could be torn up by utility companies like a driveway, is such a thing.
that's not what I said.
Well, I'm just asking for clarification, because like, how would you handle driveways, or what would your position be on?
like there's one driveway I know, for instance, that I think is a good example of what you're talking about, because it's a driveway, but then it has like a planter at the street in
Right.
what would be considered typically a right of way. And that was done, looks like probably 15, 20 years ago. I mean, I think it's a legitimate issue. And I think to answer Ms. Brown's question, I think it's not, I don't think there's a good, I think the answer to her question is probably your concern.
Right, is that we don't have any guidelines.
Right.
My biggest concern is that we should not be allowing drainage structures to be placed in the right-of-way, because those can be knocked down, and then you have no control over the drainage, which would have been a requirement of the drainage plan that was a part of the building permit for the property. And so that is not appropriate, but we don't have anything that limits that right now.
Like, what kind of drainage structures?
Like a wall that's supposed to, a detention facility that's supposed to meter the water that's come out, because to comply with state law that you're not allowed to change the direction of rate of flow coming off of your property.
What about a culvert pipe under a driveway, for example?
What I'm seeing mainly a lot of are drainage facilities that are basically a pipe that empties over the curb into the street. There's a lot of that. They're under the grass until it rains. Then there's structures that are, let's say you have a drainway that runs along the side lot line. It's handling a certain amount of drainage, you know. There's questions about how much drainage it can, you know, what it's supposed to handle. And then you have the property owner changing the configuration of that drainage area and carrying whatever structure that changes that configuration across the right of way. You know, it seems like we don't have a handle on this.
Well, wouldn't a drainage plan required for construction include the right-of-way area in the study?
It does, and I think that's what we need to, I think they certainly are looking at those issues in that drainage plan, but because there's not a hard stop in the code to say, but you gotta drop all this 5 feet back or 10 feet, whatever
Well, and
that
it's
is.
not even dropping it back. If you have a detention facility to limit the quantity of flow coming off your property, and you build that in the right-of-way, and then they come in to do construction and they knock it down, then you've got nothing that's limiting the flow coming off your property anymore.
But that's what I was saying. I was saying there's not something in the code that says it must be
Right.
so far
So
back.
that's my concern.
Right.
So those things should not be, so if you have constructed something that limits the flow and then you are transporting that flow through a pipe to get to the street, that is not as big a concern to me as the structure that is limiting the flow in the first place.
A detention
That's the
wall
part-
or
Right.
That's the
pond.
part that needs to not be in the right of way. Your front sidewalk, you know, going up to the house, the driveway, the mailbox, those things everybody has, those are not, if your mailbox gets knocked down, you may not get your mail, but it's not gonna flood your neighbor's house, right? The concern is things that cause adverse impact to neighbors or downstream properties if you put them in the right of way and then they are knocked down when somebody's doing work are right of way
Is-
as they are allowed to use.
Are there standards for this? You know, we can't be the first city to address it. I mean, are there commonly acceptable
Well, like who has a duty to
standards
repair?
are there commonly acceptable standards for what goes or doesn't go, or how you manage these issues?
Well, I mean, we had that from the Texas gas, you know, that I put in last month, a little statement in the flyer that they put in everybody's gas bill that says, do not
Okay.
construct anything in the right of way.
So if you have a driveway and the gas company or the water company comes in and cuts up your driveway to get to the lines that run through the right of way, who's gonna fix that?
They're obligated to under our.
I mean, I think technically under the law it would be the homeowner because the utility
Oh,
company
the-
has the superior right to use the right of way, and if they have to, and like, I built a shopping center in Lubbock, it's got two 24-inch water mains for the city of Lubbock coming right through the middle of it, and we built a cut in the strip center for those lines because we didn't want, if they come in and dig up those lines, they would tear down our buildings, and I think that would be on us. And so,
True.
we can use the surface of the right of way because I'm considering it like an easement, I may be wrong. But, we consider it like an easement where they have the right to go into it. We can use the surface, but if the surface gets damaged because of their use, it's kind of our problem to repair it, like the driveway or whatever else. And I think a homeowner should have a duty to maintain drainage structures that are built in accordance to a drainage plan. Like if they do get damaged, they have to get fixed.
But the point is, they can be knocked down and then they are not there to protect not the homeowner, but
Everybody else.
everybody else.
Yeah, I think part of the issue too is mixing the terms, you know, right of way versus easement versus where the property line ends, and that sort of thing. So what I would suggest is maybe we try to look at those issues and have a dialogue with council to figure out if there's some, and maybe look at some other cities of how they define rights of way and that sort of thing. And I don't know what legal issues you get into if you've got a property line that comes to back of curb now, and then you try to go in and say, oh, well, now this is considered right of way. Like there may be issues there too that we're getting into.
Do we have right-of-way marked on our GIS map? I mean, is that something when they were doing all of the map that they,
No, because they were looking at easements, but they
Mhm.
weren't necessarily looking at what's considered right of, like, because there's not really a definition. And I think
Yeah.
I think that was the
And-
difficulty that Cape Freeze was running into, right?
Right, I think so too, and I think a lot of it depends on the street, like it's if the street is centered or not, there might be right of way on one side, but not on the other, it's, you know, not all properties, some of them are gonna go straight up to the curb, and then the question is there even right of way there?
that might be good to know.
And,
Right, yeah, I mean, I guess that's what we ran into.
and as far as the problem we're trying to solve, has there been any instance that anyone, that you could point to where somebody knocked down some drainage feature that then caused flooding for a neighbor or somebody else? I
We
mean, if
have-
that's the problem we're trying to solve.
I don't
We have
know
drainage
of it, but-
structures in the right-of-way.
But his question was, do we have an example of one that was knocked
Yeah,
down?
'cause
I
it
don't, but I'm not saying that
May not
didn't.
be a
I
problem
don't
to
say
have
that.
them in the right of way is what I'm saying.
Right.
The only problem is, I think that you pointed out, is they might get damaged and then not repaired. And so I'm just trying to figure out if that's ever happened.
And my thought too would be, I mean, could we put setback, I mean, could we do something with setbacks, required setbacks, so that way it doesn't matter if there's a, you know, specific right of way or not? Could it be, you can't put
Right.
this within whatever from a setback perspective, not a right of way perspective? I mean, that
We have
might
that
be.
with our fences, where we say you
Mhm.
can't build a fence closer than 15 feet from the curb,
Sure.
right? So, I mean, it would be this.
My
the
guess
same
is
kind of
that's
thing.
gonna be an easier road to go down than this right-of-way road, because that's,
Those are setbacks.
those are setbacks, and that's not, you're not getting into a taking question, so.
We can't be the first city
We
to
can't.
have
Right.
this issue.
Right.
I don't know if K-Freeze is a good resource or ATS, but I would suggest we ask.
Why don't we do that? We'll get back with them. We'll also consult with Charlie and see if we can't figure out a better option or an option. Okay. Can you make a note for us to do that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, moving off of agenda item number 17, moving on to agenda item number 18, discussion and possible action to amend the requirements for service on boards and commissions to remove the requirement of citizenship. I think this is Mr. Glasheen's agenda item. Recognize Mr. Glasheen.
Yes. Sorry, let me get my note here. So there are several reasons I support removing the citizenship requirement to serve on Rolling Wood boards and commissions. State law currently requires city council members to be citizens, and the council then in turn appoints all boards and commissions, and so we do have in effect, a citizen oversight of that process. Removing the requirement would not require us to appoint a non-citizen to a board or commission. It would just remove that barrier to us appointing one, and certainly individual council members could consider citizenship of an applicant to a board or commission when they consider whether to support that appointment. One of my concerns is that the requirement is somewhat meaningless, because since council appoints persons to boards and commissions, council could vote to waive the citizenship requirement anytime they made an appointment. So it's in effect an illusory requirement that only has the effect of sending a message to non-citizens that their participation is not welcome, which I have some concerns about for a variety of reasons, one of which is several people in our community have started as non-citizens and become citizens. If somebody is a resident in Rollingwood, and in most cases is a homeowner, I think they have a vested interest in the community and should be encouraged. I've known of non-citizen residents in our community from Ukraine, Great Britain, India, Mexico, who raise children here, and often their children are citizens who live in the home, and I consider their household should have the opportunity to have a say in what's going on, even if the non-citizen parent is speaking on behalf of the family. I don't see any national security threat to having non-citizens serve on council. I think that citizenship is just one of the circumstances that ought to be considered for an applicant when they apply to serve. So I would rather encourage persons to participate and then evaluate each candidate on the totality of their circumstances. And that's why I brought this forward and was requested to by some people in the community who expressed the opinion that the citizenship requirement was unnecessarily offensive to some people.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Glasheen. Questions, comments for Mr. Glasheen, or happy to take motions, however you want to proceed.
Well, we just went down this road not too long
Right.
ago.
We did.
And my recollection was that there was state law that required citizenship for some of these positions, and that we had already changed it to comply with state law.
The only state law that addresses citizenship is for council. You have to be a U.S. citizen to run for council, but there is no state law that applies to local boards and commissions with regard to citizenship.
I thought you had said that P and Z and
No,
Board of
I
Adjustment
Never said
required.
that, nope. Y'all created that local requirement, but I never said that they had to.
So we did go down this road recently, but we also went down the other road about 2 years previous to that. So we've been down all these roads. But
And we removed the citizenship requirement for all the boards and commissions except P and Z and Board of Adjustment, and is what we did,
And RCDC.
and RCDC. And so this motion only pertains to those remaining three commissions and
Gotcha.
committees.
And it was because they were pseudo judicial or something?
Well,
Board of
the
Adjustment.
zoning board of adjustment is a quasi-judicial board associated with lot-specific decisions made within the community. Planning and zoning well, if you look at AG opinions, they say it's an officer regardless. I don't agree with those opinions, but it doesn't matter. But if they approve plats, I think they're clearly an officer, and I think they approve plats for our community, so in here they would be an officer. And then I don't know about this.
RCDC is the other one.
Yeah, it's a nonprofit corporation, so
But there's
Ms.
no
Brown.
citizenship
Yeah.
requirement under state law for any of
not for
those.
nonprofit corporations. You can be on.
Ms. Brown?
RCDC, their articles of incorporation require that board members be voting residents of the city of Rollingwood. That's why RCDC was not among one of the reasons why RCDC was not among one of the boards for which the voting residency requirements were removed. Planning and zoning is considered, members of that board are considered public officials under state law. They're subject to the ethical standards. Their action by P and Z they're not merely advisory. Action by P and Z can require that there be a supermajority vote at the council for approval of a zoning change. They also, and then Board of Adjustment, as Charlie says, they're quasi-judicial. Those board members are required to, the decisions made by the Board of Adjustment aren't even subject to city council review. So they are binding on the city and can create liability on the part of the city, but they're not subject to review by the council. So they're not purely advisory. They're more like a public official. The reason historically for having a requirement that board members have the same qualifications as a member of the council is so that those people who've served in those positions have the training and experience and community knowledge. The community has knowledge of what kind of decision maker they are, what kind of a leader they are, what kind of a compromiser they are. And so those positions have been used to fill positions on the city council. So, under state law, we can't change state law that city council members are required to be not only citizens, but also voting residents for a period of time within the community before you can stand for election for council. So, when this issue came up before, there were maybe 15 different people that wrote to me after I installed what had been the prior standards, that you had to be a member of you had to be eligible to serve on council to serve on any board and commission. And what we did after looking at those comments and talking with those people and having public forums with those people, with the people who had expressed an interest, we came up with a compromise position so that for service on Board of Adjustment, RCDC, because it's required by their Articles of Incorporation, and Planning and Zoning, we retained the same, that those commissions would have to have the same qualifications as a city council member. And for all the other boards and commissions, we removed the citizenship requirement. When you remove the citizenship requirement, you then have to say, well, what are going to be the residency requirements and the age requirements, and and whether or not there are any disqualifications like felony conviction. Of course, we can, look at all of that as an appointment process. But the other thing I think we need to think about in making this kind of decision is that not only do we want to have people serve on boards and commissions that are vested in the community, we also want the community to be comfortable with those people who are appointed. And so, we might have someone under the current ordinance, to serve on an advisory committee, you would have to be a resident of the city for at least 6 months. For planning and zoning and Board of Adjustment, is 6 months long enough? Will people in the community know that appointee well enough in a 6-month time period to trust them with these more important decisions that are made? I think we have, and I have not seen anyone, I've not had any correspondence, or I don't think the council's gotten any correspondence from anybody after we amended this ordinance back in September to make that cut between advisory boards and commissions and those that weren't. So I'm not hearing any community concern about the ordinance that was passed in September. So I'm not in favor of changing that ordinance. And if we were to change it, before we can consider it, we need to know what the details are going to be for any qualifications. Would it be back to no qualifications required at all? So, it's one thing to say citizenship shouldn't be a requirement, but when you also have to say what is a requirement in drafting any change to this ordinance. So that's where I am.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, that's why I hate to think that I've offended people, and I'm sure I have with my vote on things. It's definitely not what I intend to do or try to do. I just kind of go with what my gut tells me I think is right on some of these things. And in this case, I just feel like we landed on a good compromise position back in September. So I haven't really changed my position on that. So. And I know that's going to offend some people.
Well, when I would like to respond to one point that Ms. Brown made about that if we remove the citizenship requirement as a qualification, then we must define what does qualify someone to serve. And my answer to that is that what defines them to be qualified to serve is that if we as a council, a majority votes to appoint them. That qualifies them to serve. And if you don't want to appoint somebody because they're a felon, or because they're a Chinese national, or because they're too old or too young, or haven't lived here long enough, or you just don't like them, you can do that. You can vote for any of those reasons because they are political appointments. And so I don't think we need to, start going through and trying to predefine who it is that we would vote for or not vote for, because then what if somebody comes along that you want to vote for who doesn't meet your qualifications exactly, but they're eager to serve and they are well qualified for other reasons in the totality of circumstances, well, then we're just going to vote to waive the requirement anyway. So these requirements are really kind of meaningless because council ultimately gets to vote on who to appoint. And they can, waive requirements or change requirements at any time. And so if we just create these requirements and put them out there, all we're doing is just sending a message as to who's welcome and who's not welcome to participate. And I just don't think it's the right message, and that it's unnecessary, because I don't think that it creates any threat to our community or to our national security or anything else to have people who are not citizens serving on, a board or a commission. I mean, up until the last vote, you couldn't be on the Parks Commission if you were a non-citizen. And, if you're from Ukraine, which we do have Ukrainians who live here in our community, you can't be on the Parks Commission. It just seems to me unnecessary. Now, I know we changed that one, but even so, I just don't see the threat that we're trying to address here. But that's all I had to say about it.
Yes, ma'am. But let me make sure council's done. Okay, thank you, council. Any other comments from council? And then I will do some brief public comments, and then I'll take any motions that remain. Recognize yourself.
Shanti Jaykumar, 3309 Park Hills Drive. Immigrant from India, came here in 1979 and to Rollingwood in 1983. In 84, we moved into our home. It'll be 40 years this year. But we were not citizens of this country for different reasons, because we had elderly parents in India and we needed to be able to leave at short notice. There was no dual citizenship that India offered. So in 2000, we decided to become citizens of this country. Until then, I had no clue what went on at City Hall, honestly, because it's like taxation without representation kind of thing, I don't mean it literally, but once I became a citizen in 2000, I came to every single board and commission meeting that was going on. And in 2003, I was appointed. I'd taken the oath of office in 2000, so I became a citizen in 2000, and Tom Farrell was the mayor. He appointed me to the Board of Adjustment at that time. So there was so much passion in me to serve this community, to save this country. It all fell into place. And I lived with that from 1984 till 2000. We knew we were not citizens, and I didn't think anything of not being allowed to serve on it. It was the rule. You go by the rules. So I am very happy with the way you all have come up with this compromise, where certain boards and commissions, the three that were mentioned, you need to be citizens. There's really good reason for that. Nothing to do with national security or anything like that. And I tried looking through my notes, and I know our council had talked about the reasons why those three boards need to have citizens. So we've been down that road already. So I just thought I'll put in my 2 bits here to tell you that if somebody is so passionate, they can serve in so many other ways in this community. They don't have to be on a board or commission where they don't qualify, or those three that they don't qualify on. Again, if anybody wants to talk to me more about how to be passionate about Rollingwood, I'm very happy to share that. Okay.
Thank you, Shanti. Appreciate it. With that, council, I'm happy to accept a motion or not.
So I'll make a motion. We remove the citizenship requirement for Board of Adjustment, P&Z, and RCDC.
We have a motion by Mr. Glasheen. Is there a second?
Oh.
Yes, ma'am.
A technical question here.
Yes, ma'am.
The motion is remove the citizenship requirement. What the ordinance requires is the same qualifications as applied to candidates for the position of alderman. So,
I'll treat that as a parliamentary inquiry, and I'll ask the,
thank you.
I'll ask the council member to restate his motion.
Okay, so, right now, the ordinance does, Ms. Brown is correct, it does state that, for those three commissions, Board of Adjustment, P and Z, and RCDC, that in addition to the other requirements, that the applicants be qualified as, required to serve as an alderman, which, I would just move that we strike that one section of the code, that one paragraph that requires that person serving on those three committees and any one of those three committees be qualified to serve on council.
Okay, you have a restated motion, council, by Mr. Glasheen. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Can we discuss without having a second?
No, you cannot. Okay, hearing no second, the motion fails adoption. With that, council, we are done at 9:45. I commend you all for your excellent work this evening. Enjoy your night's sleep. So with that, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
You have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
You are adjourned.